do another cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you for being back on. I appreciate you, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. You know, winter has been long. Work has been rough, but such is life, right? But I have some Jeremy Johnson's Uppercut whiskey to start it off, so
the plug is real.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about that off the record about like the seasons and all that, and you were talking about how you're kind of over the winter, but don't you think you kind of need some sort of reprieve or like a valley to your top or to your mountain to kind of give you that delta, that reference point? Like you have to have a season that you don't necessarily like to really appreciate the ones you do, right?
For sure. And I love, like you said, the slowing down. I love the holidays. That's time for reflection, family, you know, remembering things as a kid that you can appreciate now. Like, for instance, like I remember one year I wanted a PlayStation. My brother wanted a Nintendo 64. I don't know how my parents did that in retrospect, but we both got that in games. And now when you look back on it, you're like, man, that was a big ask.
That's a big ask.
And they pulled it off. So now that I'm older, I think of how they did it and probably what they had to do to get that done. So I do enjoy that slowing down part. But then, you know, especially in what I do in advertising, as soon as it flips back, the rat race begins all over again. And even though businesses are slow and people don't want to talk and there's storms and flu going around, they don't care. So
can I ask you, has it always been the case that everything is still open during the holidays? I remember when I was little, like everything was shut down for Thanksgiving. And like Christmas, everything was shut down. If you didn't do your shopping Christmas Eve or before, tough. There was no Christmas, like the grocery stores weren't open on Christmas. Like the only things that were open were like the police officer, the firefighter, and the hospitals. That's it. Everybody else was at home.
True.
Now yes. I feel like there's no more reverence for the holidays. It's all still commercial. Oh, you need that last minute stuffing? Cool, we're still open.
Well, as soon as one person saw it as an opportunity to make money, others weren't. They had to catch up because they used to do, you know, doorbuster deals on Black Friday, and now a lot of them are just open earlier or they cycle the sales in earlier. It's like people don't want us to slow down anymore. I think a lot of that is online shopping. If I can sit here, grab my phone and order something on Amazon, I should be able to go to the store and get bananas if I'm out of bananas too, instead of planning ahead. It's just all the things we sacrifice for convenience.
I don't know if I necessarily like that. I don't know if I necessarily like the fact that we don't have... I said that I like the winter because it forces me to slow down. We had a snowstorm, I believe like it was like 3 weeks ago, that we were basically out of commission for a couple days. And I understand that this is a hindrance to people, but for myself, in my bias, it was nice. I couldn't leave my house to go do a meeting or something like that. I had to stay home. I got to spend time with my daughter because we couldn't drive her to daycare. So it was like, hey, you know, sorry guys, we're going to do this meeting on Teams and my kid's in the back screaming at Moana and this is what it's going to be. And I understand that you can't do that all the time, no. But it was nice to have that for the 3-4 days. And, you know, as I get older, I understand more and more what people that were older than me were telling me about, like, enjoy this time, enjoy this time, enjoy this time. But it's such a fucking cliche. How are you going to tell me to stop and enjoy it and smell the roses and enjoy my present when, like, everything that I'm doing is to try to kind of better the future, especially, like, if you have kids or some sort of responsibility, you know what I mean? I can't do both. So sometimes when life forces me to slow down, I count it a blessing.
I do enjoy when it does it. That day in particular, we were given no communication and had to drive into work, and it was just a mess.
What?
Yeah. I don't
For the snowstorm?
Yeah. So my usual 20-minute commute was an hour and 15 minutes. And then someone walked around.
Could you work remote if you needed to?
Oh, we have laptops. We can do our entire job remote. But
why didn't you just tell them, like, go fuck yourself? Like, I'm working from home.
I used to run a small business, manage it, and any weather, I was the first one to go. It doesn't bother me so much, you know, driving through it. But that in particular was a bad one. And so the fact that where I work has access to the weather and knew that, and then someone came around to basically take attendance, it rubbed me.
Excuse me?
Yeah, they came around to see who
was in the
decided
office?
to come in. Yeah.
What is the purpose of giving people laptops if then they cannot use them? Isn't that the whole goal? If in case something happens, hey, it's snowing, stay home, guys. Just work from home.
Yeah. Old mindsets.
I don't know if
you're
that's
not in the
old
building,
mindsets
you're
or
not
that's
working.
fucked up ones.
It's both. It's both. I mean, innovation you have to embrace some of it. Now, you don't have to go full bore, like hand off the gas, but there's some things that like you can just kind of let go, or it's one of those things. And I think you told me this on the phone when I was telling you something about this, and you said it's so easy to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then when they choose not to do the right thing, it just makes it harder. And then you start noticing every other action around it. And, while we're in the slower season and something like that happens, it makes it seem more like it's not about taking care of the people that are there. And I'm trying to be very careful when I talk about this.
Obviously, I don't want to badmouth your current employer. Just wanted to take a second to pause the action and just tell you guys, thank you so much for consuming our content. Easy Talk is a passion project. This podcast is just a bunch of like-minded people coming together to produce some cool stuff and talk to some cool people. One of the things I would very much appreciate is if you could possibly like the video or subscribe to the channel, just because it helps us in the algorithm and ultimately to grow, to get more exposure to everybody, including ourselves, and ultimately just make a better product. Take a second, I'd greatly appreciate it, and on with the show. Let me take it from the current employer and kind of expand a little bit. What do you think of remote work? High level and then in the weeds. Like high level, do you think net positive, net negative? What do you think of remote work?
I think it's a great option. I think some industries can completely rely on it. Some jobs can completely rely on it. I think for me, I would like the option. I would prefer more kind of a hybrid because I do like to mingle and all that. Now, it doesn't mean I need to be there from this time period to this time period to come in, check out. Most everything you can do for work is remote. And I feel like, and we were talking about this earlier, I feel like some of that might be going away as we pull back with some of this political landscape now.
I will say that I think remote work is genius, and that the negative connotations along with remote work are a vision into the hiring process. If I hire people that I have to physically micromanage, that I have to be in proximity of, that I have to kind of maintain that they're doing their job, why did I hire them?
Weak leadership micromanages, though.
I think middle management has to create its job.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because
too.
when you have remote work now and everyone's working from home and everyone has kind of delegated their work either through email or through meetings or IM or what have you, I mean, for people that work in information systems or information technology, chances are they don't even need an upper management. They have a ticket system. People supply them with tickets. They knock tickets out, and then they're like, it has all the data repository for, Jordan did 100 tickets today and Arion did 90. We could easily see the productivity gap there or what have you. I would make the argument that with the advancement of remote work and then ticketing systems or, KPI managers, you don't need middle management. You just don't need it.
A lot of it is the commute's just kind of a pain too. You can get more out of just answering emails in the morning, and I get some of the hybrid models. Spend 3 days remote, 2 in office, or rotate that. I get that, but to come in every day just kind of feels like an outdated check.
If you have the ability to work remote, I agree with you.
Yeah.
There's some jobs that you can't do remote plumbing, you can't do remote laying tiles or remote firefighting, right? But I do agree. I told you this when we were having dinner, and I said, remote work will be a boon to the employers that see it for what it is. And it is an additional quality of life adjustment for a good employee. When you're hiring someone, there are like tangible benefits and then the intangible benefits. So a lot of times, what's the very first thing you ask a new employer? What's the job title? What's the salary, right? Because those are like the forefront things. Then what are the other questions? Work-life balance, like how much PTO, what's your healthcare like? If you want me to be 100% in the office, what are the amenities like? Do we have a facilities unit? Like, do you provide any sort of lunch? Or like, there's like a lot of other things that, like, let's say someone's offering you $10,000 less, but they tell you that you could be fully remote. What would you say? Would you be willing to take that salary hit?
less?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
I
say
would
instead of
take
$100,000, the job was $90,000, but it was 100% remote. Would you take it?
Yeah, I would.
Over the job that was, let's say, $100,000 hybrid, 3 days in the office, 2 days work from home.
Always 3 days in a week in office?
Always 3 days
How
in the
long
week.
is the commute?
30 minutes.
Yeah, I'm taking the remote job.
The remote job still. And 30 minutes isn't even
And
a
you know
long
what? I
commute.
might show up to the office every now and then just to check in still.
Just to have
on
fun.
my own time.
Yeah, whenever you feel like it.
But yeah, no,
You have a hoteling cube. If you ever want to come in, you can. If you don't, don't. So you're willing to take a 10K hit in salary to have the quality of life or the work-life balance that remote work affords you.
yeah.
If every employer wanted to overnight reduce their labor expenses, they would take this into consideration.
Yeah, that's true.
You could pay people slightly less, top line that profitability for yourself, and then people are happier because now they work from home. The best employees that I know, the smartest people that I know, refuse to go into the office. They won't do it. If a job is at the very least not hybrid, 3 days work from home, 2 days in the office, and the commute's decent, they just won't take it. And these are some like, we're talking about like engineers, like software engineers, like coders, like they can. Oh, I don't want to do that, so go fuck yourself. And it's about leverage.
See, I feel like other industries outside of that or different jobs, those hiring managers, they view anyone asking about work-life balance as a negative connotation. Like you're already asking about a way not to work.
Well,
that's how they view it.
I think there's a way to ask. Here's the problem with a lot of employers nowadays, or a lot of employees. They are entitled. We do have a generation of a workforce that is entitled.
Yeah,
that is true. And I don't care what anybody says. Like, take a long, hard look at the people to your right and left at work. You'll see it. The problem is that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong about everything. To your point about, employers seeing certain things in the interview process being red flags, yeah, they would be for you as well. If, like, let's say you're a gym owner and you're interviewing fighters or people that are coming up to you and saying, like, Jordan, I want to be a fighter. And your very first question is like, all right, man, well, how hard are you willing to work? Well, I can only make it into the gym 3 days a week. What are you going to say? All right.
Like, that's cute.
Well, you're not going to be in the UFC,
That's
right?
cute. Yeah.
So it's like, imagine, you have this job board out, and let me add a separate layer though. Not only is this guy not willing to come in more than 3 days a week, but you have a line out the door of people that want to be training under Jordan Dowdy, and the guy right behind him says, I'll come in here 7 fucking days a week whenever you want. Who are you going to take? And that's the variable, the competitive aspect. You can stake your claim. You can put your flag down and say, this is the hill that I'm going to die on. But then you have to have the skill set and the merit base to acquire that. If you are easily replaced, do not be shocked if you become replaced. If you are difficult to replace, suddenly you have a little bit more leverage. Yes, I want hybrid. No, I don't want to do this. I refuse to do that. And that comes with two things, intelligence and experience. Intelligence can be in the form of your degree, apprenticeship, some sort of document that says, I know this thing. And the wisdom could be, or the experience could be, your time in work. I've worked 10 years. I have a high school diploma, but I've been working 10 years in sales. That's equivalent work experience. You know what you're doing in sales. You don't need to go get a degree in business now for 4 years once you have 10 years experience in sales, right? I think the problem is with the internet, with Reddit, with LinkedIn and all these tools that people have to look at salaries, all this other stuff, they become entitled. Oh, the average salary of this position is this, so that's what I deserve. Are you average? Are you average? What if you're below average? What if you don't deserve that? And by the way, what if you're above average? Why would you want average? It's to each their own. So to your point, the original, forgive me, because I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent. When you were saying that talking about a work-life balance is like a red flag, it depends on the job. If you're going to be a line cook at a fast food restaurant and you're talking about, instead of what days you're available, how much PTO you need and all that, and there's a line out the door for this job because it's minimum wage and you don't need any experience to get it, forgive me if that is going to be the one that breaks you. But if you have a 4-year degree, or if you have some sort of apprenticeship, or if you're an invaluable labor source, then yeah, fucking talk about your work-life balance. I want this, that, and the other. You're going to offer me this much money. Now it's a negotiation. Hey, this job is $100,000 a year. I want remote. I'm willing to take $10K less. Would you be available for something like that? This is how it happens. Too many people think that they can't negotiate. The worst thing you can say is no. You didn't have the job to begin with. So you're right back to square one.
I think they feel it's so competitive. If they don't take everything that's offered, it's gone.
What if I told you it only is because of H-1Bs?
I would say go on. Keep with that thought.
When you are allowed to post a job opening with the antithesis or with the thought process of not caring if the position is filled, because one of the precursors for an H-1B license to bring in foreign labor, you have to show that you can't get this role filled in America by Americans, that you have to outsource the labor source from across the pond, so to speak. So here's what happens. You get something on Indeed. It says marketing director or, business analyst 1. Minimum 4 years experience, 4-year degree, starting pay is $50,000. And you're just like, how? That's insane. Who would do that for that? Like, you would need $80,000 minimum. You want 4 years experience and a 4-year degree? The reason they put that up there for that pay is because they know they won't fill it. They know. No one with those credentials will go for a job for $50,000 a year. They know that.
There's a lot of those out there.
And they do that on purpose to then go to the government and say, we need an H-1B to fill this role. This thing has been up for 4 months and we can't find an adequate American to do the job. What they don't say is that the market rate for that role is vastly superior to what they're offering. So when we say that it's hyper competitive, only because certain employers can apply for certain licenses to get work from abroad, and that the H-1B is, in my opinion, white-collar legalized slavery in the year of our Lord 2025. I saw it happen. Where they dangle the citizenship in front of these people as if, hey, you don't have to work 60-hour weeks, but if you don't, and we're your employer and we're sponsoring you and your family just came down and your kid just got enrolled in school and we fire you because you don't want to do the extra shit, you got to go back to home country. I see people, white-collar workers, 4-year degree, 4-year or 6-year degree holders, be treated like meat because their citizenship or their ability to stay in this country is directly tied to their employer. And I have one way you can fix that overnight with a single piece of legislation. The argument for the H-1B is that we want to attract the best and brightest to America. We don't want them to go to India, China, Russia, Europe, any of our competitors. We want the brain drain to come towards America, not leave America. Well then, with this thought process, why would you ever tie the citizenship to an employer? If someone is smart enough, if their skill set is so adequate that we are willing to forgo the immigration process because you're so valuable to our economy, we want to bring you in, why would you then tie that citizenship to the employer? Give them a green card on day one. And that way the employer still has to abide by certain laws and restrictions, and that they can't just fucking turn this person into a slave market. And if they decide to fight back in any way, shape, or form, they can leave and join the market again. Because if they're smart enough to get to this country, I venture to say they're smart enough, I want them to stay.
It's like an upgraded non-compete.
Yes.
It's like a way upgraded non-compete.
Yes.
And wasn't that one of the things they had a contention on, that Elon wanted to keep that in the immigration
Yes.
policy and everybody was going after
Yes.
him?
Dude, Vivek basically shot himself. I've never seen anybody like commit political suicide faster than Vivek with one tweet. When he did that tweet about saying like, the culture of America is one of mediocrity and all this other shit. Shut the fuck up. Not everybody's going to be a math valedictorian or into STEM. We in America thrive as a powerhouse because we have so much more to offer than just STEM. And I say this in full knowledge of how hypocritical I am because I'm in STEM. We are the juggernauts of art in the world. We outsource culture, okay? To be an American is cool. It's hip, it's all these other things. And if anybody says anything different, shut the fuck up. You're not in any of these countries. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You go to Albania, they wish they were Americans. You go to Bosnia or any of these other like Balkan states, they wish they were in America. Go to the Middle East. Everyone wants to come to America because of the opportunity and all these other things, because it's cool. There's no other country where someone's like, man, that Russian dream is really thriving. Oh, how about that Chinese dream? I'm going to go to UK or I'm going to go to France for that France dream. There's only one dream, the American dream. Why is that? Because we understood that what makes us powerful is not necessarily just the tangible, but intangible as well. And while I value the STEM fields, don't fucking sit there and badmouth Americans who don't necessarily follow the same trajectory in life as you, Vivek.
Yeah. And that is one thing that does really kind of aggravate me, especially now. I mean, if your political team lost and then you're going to badmouth the country, like, that's internal strife. Like, we can have strifes in the family, but don't, like, you have no perspective. You need to go live in another country and see what's going on, because whether you like the guy in charge or not, that's your home. That's your country. That's where you're from. Like, well, not in your instance because you immigrated here, your family did, but, you know, there's people here that have generations that have been here, and now this place is dog shit because you're not going to get your way because of some policy. Like, did you prepare yourself for that in a certain way? Because if you're relying on the government or how your life's going to shape out, it's not going to go well for you.
I'll go a step further and say first-generation immigrants do it too. The ones that don't want to come over here and assimilate, the ones that don't want to acclimate to the Western culture. If you are fleeing a nation of, you know, economic downturn, or perhaps, let me be careful how I say this, perhaps the opportunities are not as robust as you would want. So you are leaving whatever country that you originated from to come to America. And you're doing so with this mental calculus of like, there's more opportunity, there's more freedom, there's more this, that, or the other. You then cannot go to that land and then want to change it to go back to, you know, whatever country you came from. You're going to a different territory.
Yep.
Learn.
You're in the melting pot.
Let's make it a little smaller. You leave a gym to go to another gym. Are you going to take the norms, the morals, the character, and all that from that gym and then tell your new gym that you're going to have to change? Or are you going to shut the fuck up day one, see which guys are the guys, see who's the coaches of what, and figure out the lay of the land and then adjust yourself accordingly? Because now you're in different territory and you realize that you're not the owner of this. You're just one of many.
Yeah, it's interesting times. I bet you're happy right now, right?
Yes and no. I feel like we have dodged a bullet by Kamala Harris not being elected, but not because of Kamala Harris, but because of the machine behind her. And I don't necessarily think that Donald Trump is the most capable leader that we had for the position. However, I will say that I think I voted for Donald Trump for the last 3 elections, 2016, 2020, and 2024, for all different reasons. In 2016, it was a counter vote against Hillary Clinton. I desperately,
as did many others.
Yeah, I desperately did not want Hillary Clinton, so I voted for Donald Trump. Honestly, full hindsight, I didn't think Donald Trump was going to win. I was like, I'm not voting for her.
I don't think he did either. Did you see his face that night?
Yeah, I don't think yeah. So then he wins, okay? And then in 2020, the reason I voted for him is if you remove COVID, he had like I would have graded him like a B+ to A- presidency. Every metric for life was good. GDP growth was faster than the previous administration in terms of year-over-year growth rate. Illegal immigration was at an all-time low. We had peace through strength for the majority of it. I mean, yes, you could point out some conflicts in the Middle East, like Yemen. There has always been conflict, but for the vast majority, no new wars, no new conflicts, just putting away old enemies, so to speak. And then, in my opinion, their tax policy was one of the most robust pieces of legislation passed in my lifetime. Yes, it helped the millionaires, the billionaires, but it was also something as simple as the one-child tax credit for the middle class. J.D. Vance said it very well one day where he's like, it's not government's job to legislate how you live your life. But if we as a culture want to move in a direction, you want to incentivize it. I can't make you have kids. But what I can do is say, hey, I understand how hard it is to have a kid. It's in our best interest for more Americans to have kids. So we will give you more of your money back if you have kids because we know what kind of financial strife that is. This is the proper way to do it. I voted in 2020 for Donald Trump because he was a good president. He had a great administration. He had a good 4 years. He lost. And if you take away COVID, I don't even know if he would lose, right? So like it took a pandemic to make that race even close. I voted for him in 2024 because I said this before and I'll say it again. I genuinely was rooting for Joe Biden. I wanted them to do a good job. I didn't care that Donald Trump lost. I still wanted the trajectory of America to be peace and prosperity and safety and opportunity. Jordan, I did not think in my lifetime I could ever see a country make such a shift economically and militarily in 4 years than under Joe Biden. It was truly insane to me. And I for the first time in my lifetime, started to feel the creeping nature of the totalitarianism, the communism that my dad fled Albania from. He used to tell me stories about how the government came in with these veiled promises of peace and prosperity, and we'll give you everything you need. And then it became an iron fist. You will do as we say or we won't allow you to live. I'll never forget the State of the Union address where Joe Biden essentially put a mandate on employers of, I believe it was over 50 employees or something like that. Anyone over 50 employees, any business over 50 employees, they had to mandate for their employees to get the vaccine or they could not work. So once again, we're not going to legislate you have to get the vaccine. We're going to incentivize it by not allowing you to live. I never thought I would have seen that in America, ever. Yet there it is. And it took all the way to the Supreme Court 3 weeks before the deadline of October for the Supreme Court to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You can't do this. This is unconstitutional in the highest parameter, and was shot down unanimously. But I know people that were forced to get the vaccine from their employers that now have vaccine side effects. Or I know people that did not want to get the vaccine and then were fired, and now who knows what trajectory their life had, or not fired, they stepped down voluntarily. I voted for Donald Trump in 2024 as a counter vote once again to the Democratic Party. And this is coming from someone who voted for Obama in 2012. Make it make sense.
Yeah, it's different. It's hard to know because the entire world had problems after COVID, catching up, supply chains.
Not the entire world. Not the entire world, Jordan.
Pricing everywhere. Inflation was up everywhere.
Inflation?
No. Let me finish my point, though, because I'm not arguing.
Sorry.
So, everybody struggled afterward trying to get back there.
If you outsourced your manufacturing, you had supply chain issues. If you didn't, you were fine.
That, along with a lot of this culture stuff.
Ooh.
And
talk about that.
I'm all live and let live, but when you see these videos of people going up and asking someone what is a woman and they can't even answer what that is, and I'm all about do whatever you want to do, be who you want to be, as long as it doesn't affect kids. I don't care, but some of the stuff you saw out there was so crazy. And I would tell people around me that weren't Trump fans, and I'm personally not a Trump fan, this is how he's going to win. This is how he's going to get elected. And
meaning the Democrats are going to shoot themselves in the foot with these social issues.
Yeah, especially with some of the hormones for kids in schools, some of the censorship issues that are going around, just being when's the last time you saw a really over-the-top funny movie like Tropic Thunder? People are too afraid to make something like that anymore. It's kind of says something about the culture there and where it went. Everybody's so uptight and afraid of hurting everyone's feelings. And you know what? Life is hard. It's not necessarily easy. But all those things going on with it, and then especially now when you look at the things he's done in the first handful of days.
Talking about Trump or Biden? Trump.
So imagine if you had someone, I'm more left of center slightly, have your guns, leave gay people alone. Let's find a way to help people with health care. If you want religion to be taught to your kids, you can do it at home, take them to school. That's part of your parent privileges or, duties, really.
Separation of church and state.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the thing the right loses me on, is I feel like they try and put some of that in there. If you're all for personal freedoms, don't legislate that stuff on there. But the stuff he's done in the first month, just we're signing this, we're going to do this. Anything that Biden did that was good, he should have been on camera claiming it. And that's what Trump's doing. signing off all these things, saying, here's what this is. Oh, here's the JFK files we're going to release. He's not only just showing action, which was hard to see under Biden, but he's also putting himself out there as the face of it. And that's just ballsy. And a lot of people they like ballsy. I mean, he was at the Super Bowl. He was in the Daytona 500. Yeah, he's acting like a celebrity, but a lot of people kind of like...
Well, he is a celebrity.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of like that he's putting himself into some of these big American events. So whether... I mean, they could have had a much better representation of it. And there was some stuff that, especially around, like for me, the January 6th, and there's other stuff coming out now, whether it was fabricated or not, all that. He did some stuff that, they thought was going to have to be in court. But after all that stuff was known and they still voted him in, I can't even care about that anymore. There was a mandate passed, so we're along for the ride. We're going to see what's going to happen here. Some of the government efficiency stuff they're unearthing is great. My only qualm with that is I see everybody celebrating they're seeing on the Democrat side, and you can't tell me that's just one-sided. So are we being very specific on what we're unearthing on there? Because I want to see all of it if we're going to go that route.
I think, if I may, I want to take a step back and kind of...
Yeah.
Because you were on a lot of good points. Let's start first with the culture, societal shifts that came with the 2020 election, and then so on. I agree with you where I saw things get very weird very fast. And I also subscribe to that same mentality. Sometimes I go back and forth between, I think I'm right of center, but then sometimes I think I'm just libertarian. Like, I'm very just like, I don't want the government to tell me what to do. And by extension, I don't want the government to tell you what to do. But you can only live and let live so long as your neighbor is allowing you to live. The problem with it was not the severity of what they were trying to do, truthfully. It was how quickly and how powerfully they were trying to do it. It took homosexuals roughly 20 to 30 years, dating back as far as like 1980 for some of these rights, to have the equivalent rights that straight couples have. Something as simple as just getting married, right? And benefiting from the tax benefits and being able to have land and titleship and ownership, what have you.
And that's something that's been around since the dawn of
man. There's always been homosexuality.
It wasn't just made up after the country was made because sin was let into the country.
But I hate to say it this way, but they did it the right way. You can't... I don't want someone to not be a racist because I tell them to not be a racist. I want them to not be a racist because they realize that racism is dumb. I don't want to tell someone, don't be homophobic. I don't want them to be homophobic because they realize it's stupid. Oh, why am I going to hate you because you're gay? You probably couldn't even choose that. You know what I mean? I don't want to force an ideology on people. If they don't come to the conclusion themselves, who am I to sway that judgment? I can't force you to do anything, Jordan, just like you can't force me to do anything. Now, you cannot force me to believe all of these things, hook, line, and sinker, from transgenderism to a lot of the new, LGBTQI plus whatever. There was a lot of things that started to get covered in that umbrella. Some things I was willing to, with some of my proclivities, accept. Some things, especially with regards to children, go fuck yourself. Mm-hmm. The reason why it got such a big backlash was not because they were pushing some of these things, but it was because they were also pushing for legislation on some of these things. When certain states, like in California, pass state legislation that says the parents do not need to be told that their kids want to do any sort of transgender surgeries or assignments or anything, where they don't need, the kids no longer need the parental permission to do that. That is insane, and that is an overreach of government. That's an overreach of government. Now, if you would have taken the time to educate people on this process and say, like, hey, transgenderism has also been here, so let us show you, let us educate you, let us kind of, illuminate this path, then over the course of time, you would have swayed people, because if what you're saying is right, it would have been right. Just like everything else, slavery was wrong, so it was wrong. Sexism was wrong, so we also allowed for women to have the same rights as men. Over the course of history, we allowed ourselves to become enlightened over the course of time. It's painful, it's slow. Sometimes it might not be in your generation, but it's the right way to do it, because then you have a generation of people that now we don't have to think about, enslaving people. We don't have to think about Why do women get the same rights as men? It's just a foregone conclusion that all men are created equal through inalienable rights under the eyes of the law and our God, whoever that God is for you. In 4 years, they tried to push everything down our throat, and we threw it up.
There was a big machine behind it, and it's, I really do feel for anybody that does qualify in that bucket of being transgender or feeling like they're not in the right body. Now,
it sucks. I'm sure
does
it's
that
not
exist?
fun. I'm sure it's not
It's
fun.
not something you would choose.
Yeah.
However, there's a few things to unpack here. When I was growing up, we had tom girls and tom boys. With everything going on now, does it make them question that they have to make a move like this and then they can't have a conversation about it? There's stuff when I was a kid I thought for sure I knew. And then I hit 20. Nope. 22. No, I was wrong then too. You can't make life-changing choices at that age. And I feel like a lot of it became trendy. And so you have this bucket of people, and it's well-intentioned, right? But a lot of it can be virtue signaling, where we're going to stand up for every marginalized crowd, poor people, minorities over here that get treated badly. We have all these bad communities. And then there's this weird aspect where there's some of them that are almost jealous of it. How can I become marginalized too? And I feel like they try to find a home in a subgroup. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from. Because what are most of them? They're middle-class white kids, right? Are they trying to find a home for some of the people that they are fighting for? Well-intentioned, may it be? It's very strange to me because I think you're allowed to go through puberty and a process and reach adulthood. And then when you're an adult, you can basically do whatever you want. But whenever they're a kid, you're just a kid. I mean, what do you really know? You can't even drink. Like, you can barely drive. You don't even have a diploma yet. There's so many things that even, like, basic things your parents would tell you when you were a kid, and you're like, what do they know? And then you reach an age, and you're like, man, I was an idiot.
Would you agree that the inconsistency in standards for what we thought kids can and cannot do was so wildly outrageous? You are saying that I have to be at least 18 years old to purchase tobacco because of the health detriments that it has to my body, and you want me to at least coherent to understand the choices I'm making. 21 for alcohol, because what consumption of this liquid can do, not just for myself, my own body, but then, in the process of operating a motor vehicle, what I could do to other people, what have you. You're telling me that there's age brackets for certain purchases of things that are temporary, yet a kid under these ages can make life-altering decisions that they cannot go back and undo, and they somehow have the bandwidth within them to make that choice, but then can't do something as simple as purchase a cigarette or a bottle of alcohol or rent a car. You can change your gender irreversibly, but you can't rent a car. Does this make sense? Like, just logically, does this make sense?
And what I feel bad for are the people that actually really do need to go through that. Because I'm sure there are instances out there that, there are children that you can just tell, even from when they're little, just from how they interact with other kids, just
they're different.
And so now they get thrown in with all these people that are just kind of confused as they grow up. It's very strange, and I feel like that charge was led on like, hey, if you don't see how we see, kind of fuck you, you're a bigot. And it's like, well, can we have an actual conversation about this? Because you'll watch something on TV or read a news article, and this side all the way on the right wants you to believe that this is what it is, and this side all the way on the left wants you to believe this is what it is, whereas really, like, they're just putting hyperbole on both sides of the same story, and it's more like right here in the middle. And
you think common ground is still possible?
No, because if both sides have us arguing over culture stuff, they'll just keep robbing us, and we can't do anything about it.
I agree.
If everybody was united, more stuff would get done. We could vote in better politicians. We could have better conversations. We could actually, someone that you think in your brain you hate the way they live might be your neighbor that you like. You just don't know that about them.
I don't know if I agree with the word united, because you'll never get to that utopia where, like, everyone sees eye to eye. But I do think that there's a point. Okay, so dividing and conquering is one thing, but when you can divide by magnitudes, meaning I can take Jordan, who, let's say there's like 0, and then 10 is like your libtard of libtards, and -10 is libtard, +10 is like your Trumper, Bible thumper, like, you know what I mean? Like the opposite ends of the spectrum. When we're moving this Overton window so far to where we have to say something as like, you say you're left of center and I say I'm right of center, I bet we agree like on 90, 95% of shit. With that. So I think what we really are is like the independent voter. Yeah. When Democrats are wrong, I'll point it out. And when Republicans are wrong, I'll point it out. And when the Democrats are right, I'll point it out. And when the Republicans are right, I'll point it out. The CHIPS Act. That was one of the things that Biden did that I actually thought was like in the right direction. Good job. We do need that. The infrastructure package that they passed could have been good if they didn't earmark it with so much Israel and Ukraine benefits. They tried to pass a border bill, but they called it the border bill when, I believe it was something to the tune of like 22% of the funding in the border bill was going to the border, 10% of it was going to Israel, 50% of it was going to the Ukraine. But they're calling it the border bill. It's just, why do we have to do this? Why can we not just pass simple legislation? Why can we not just be transparent with the American people? If they are stupid, they will not understand it anyway. Yeah. But those that are intelligent will be able to understand it and regurgitate it for them. The problem is, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't, we have created in the absence of mainstream media, independent media is no better and does not hold itself to as high a standard for some of its due diligence. So like you could say whatever you want about mainstream media and the polarization it causes, but I see no difference in independent media. You have your conservative talk show people, you have your liberal talk show people, and the only thing they're peddling, the only thing they're selling is grift. There is no middle ground with these people. And we have to find middle ground. We have to as a nation. You cannot continue to hate half of your country. You can't.
Well, that's what they want you to do. And to your point of whatever news outlet has it, I saw some stuff about things like J.D. Vance had said, and then Trump had said, and then Kamala said. Because I was, what news source can you trust, So I was watching it all, and then I saw something about how they said, Trump said Liz Cheney should be shot by a firing squad. And then I actually went and found the clip, and that wasn't what he said. And there was instances of that of Vance, too. And there was instances of that of Kamala.
They do it both ways.
Well, and even the vice president. So I'm like, man, a lot of this stuff people say, it's just hard to know what's what.
One of the campaign ads that Trump had ended with, Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And the quote that they took for Kamala was like, Kamala talking about transgender and all that. But what they left out was that quote was done in 2017. So the election is in 2024. They pick a quote from 2017, and it made for a powerful ad. Mm-hmm. But the reason I bring that up is the Republicans do it too. They do it too.
Oh yeah, they do.
I do not see a difference between Democrat and Republican in terms of like what they're willing to do in battle. They'll lie straight to your fucking face. They will take something set out of context or in context, spew it in a different light, and then throw it out there to the ether to make you hate somebody.
Run it into the ground. Too.
Yes. The only reason I voted for the Republicans, I told you this in 2024, was as a counter vote to the Democrats. They were so wrong on so many issues, mostly economic, that I could not vote for them. I could not vote for them.
Well, all the signs, even that big election guy that predicts all the elections, said Kamala was going to win. I was watching everything.
Not Polymarket.
Win. Trump went on Rogan, Vance went on Rogan, and Elon went on Rogan. I was like, I think this is done. Long-form conversations, because not a fan of them, but after I listened to all three of those, I'm like, I'll be okay.
The more you talk to someone, the more you'll realize that you have things in common. You might not have everything in common, but what transparency and time will do is give you understanding. You might be for like pro-life and I might be pro-choice. And if we talk about it over and over and over again, after 5 hours, we may have not swayed one another, but at the very least, I can understand why you're pro-life and you can understand why I'm pro-choice or vice versa. And then at the very least, We might not see eye to eye, but we can have respect and reverence for how you've come to that conclusion yourself. You've lived a different life than I have. You might weigh certain things differently than I do. That does not make you right nor wrong. It just makes you you.
They made a big mistake, the Harris team, not going on a podcast.
They went on the Call Me Dad, Call Her Daddy? Call Her Daddy?
Call her daddy.
Yeah, they went on some podcasts. The problem was when you look at like the interviews that they did, how catered they were, how fabricated they were. When you see the underlying, like they had to go to Washington D.C. and they had to create the studio, $100 million for a podcast studio. That doesn't even, Jordan. When I tell you that makes, no, not $100 million. Sorry, $2 million. $2 million. Forgive me. Not $100 million. $2 million they spent on that studio. Jordan, if I quadrupled my set, we're at like 150,000. Yeah. And that's if I'm like being grossly negligent with money. How you spent $1 million to $2 million on a podcast studio for an hour and a half conversation is insane to me. Unless you didn't do it for that. You paid the host.
Well, and apparently...
And that's the other thing. How many celebrities got paid for their endorsements?
True.
I didn't even know that shit was legal.
A lot of it's legal now. But
Dude,
I think apparently his son is the one that told him get on those podcasts.
You talking about Barron
Yeah.
Trump was telling, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Trump also did like Theo Von, and he did
He did a couple other ones.
yeah, he did a couple of those. Forgive me.
I hope they learn.
They did Flagrant with Andrew Schultz in them as well. I watched that
he
as
also
well.
did, like Bussin' with the Boys.
I don't know
like,
which one that one
It's
is.
a football podcast. Like,
Gotcha.
It's random that Trump was on.
I hope the Democrats learn from this because it's good to have competition.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're doubling down on the wrong things. You're going to come back to the table with that same sad-ass argument. You
Did you
didn't
see the
just
DNC?
lose. You didn't just lose because of the
Did
price
you see the
of eggs.
DNC votes? They voted for the new chair and co-chair. David Hogg, the kid from the
Oh, yeah, the shooting.
he's the co-chair, and they are doubling down on all the shit that you said lost them the election. They're going to double down on, societal problems. They're going to double down on separation between like minority groups and all this other stuff. They're doubling down on the polarization, and it's like,
They didn't learn anything.
I mean this when I say this. It is not difficult to beat the current Republican Party. It really isn't.
No.
Because, if the Democrats don't have anything they're standing on, the Republicans basically stand on the anti-Democrat. And because people are so angry with inflation and immigration and all these other things, it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I see so many people that aren't Republicans that voted Republican. Hell, I voted Republican and I'm not Republican. I truly am an independent. Give me a good Democratic candidate. He can have my vote. I was going to vote RFK Jr. until he stepped down. I was going to vote for him. Me and Greg Tabor. But then when he stepped down and wanted to be the HHS secretary under Trump, that's what got my vote. I was going to vote for RFK Jr., fully knowing that was probably going to cost Trump the election and Kamala was probably going to win. But I thought to myself, it's better to vote the way I want to vote instead of the way I feel like I have to vote.
That was a smart pickup by him.
It was.
Hey, if he cleans up our food, have you seen the photos of who was in that office before and now?
Is it even comparable?
If you pull it up,
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And they've gone after him
You,
a lot. But whenever, you have these groups marching on Kellogg's about the difference in the food dyes from the Canadian Fruit Loops to the American Fruit Loops, and we have all these health issues and kids with ADHD. You're going to tell me that's not tied to the food supply and food dyes? And, like, why not? Why not let's try it and see what cleaning up our food will do? What's the worst that could happen on there?
if you ask any athlete where it starts, they'll all tell you it's the kitchen.
Yeah,
First and foremost, athletes know this
people
already.
are so tied to their feelings, they don't want to talk about their food because their food can't be it.
I don't think it's that, Jordan. I truly believe it's like, it's like you believe Santa's real, and there's a kid in the classroom telling you you're an idiot for believing that. Mm-hmm. That feeling of like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, this, my parents told me this. They would never lie to me. That's what I think is happening to a lot of liberals right now. They were told over the last 4 to 6 years that this guy is Hitler, that he's the worst thing, that democracy is going to end. Here we are, still in a democracy. Is he pushing the envelope on some things? Absolutely. And that's for the judicial system to kind of adjudicate and tell the people what's right and what's wrong. And Trump can only get away with what he's allowed to under the purview of our Constitution. So I understand why certain people have this revulsion to Trump. I do get that. What I don't understand is why they have love and reverence for the Democrats. That I don't understand.
I watch Bill Maher every week he's on. I think he's great because he's definitely a moderate. He calls him on both sides, and he was the one telling everybody Biden needs to get out early. But he put it this way: he's like, the left is gone so bad they don't even realize they lost a crazy contest to a crazy person, and they're still going to double down on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was a really perfect way to say that.
First time in my lifetime that I could vote where a Republican won the popular vote.
Well, and yeah, since George Bush won it.
I couldn't vote back then. So
Yeah.
sorry, ever since 2012, that's the first election where I could vote. Because in 2008, when Obama won, I was in high school. I was 17. I wasn't 18.
Well, and what I kept looking for this election was everybody kept going, well, if the Democrats win, it's the end of our democracy too. And I'm like, I don't understand that because the other guy did not concede an election and wouldn't leave. And that whole mess on January 6th was a problem, no matter
How
what
can you
wanna
say that?
What do you mean?
How can you say he didn't concede the election and wouldn't leave?
He did
when-
not concede. He went and basically instigated that riot. We're
Did
going
he
to storm down on the Capitol.
Did he
which we-
call Joe Biden and say congratulations? No. But did he concede the election by leaving the White House? Yes.
all the other actions that led
Telling
up
someone good
besides
job
that,
and shaking their hand and just walking out of the cage after a loss is still a loss.
there's professional courtesy that should happen.
Yeah,
He should have
but
been in all the other
Jordan-
stuff.
But those two things that you just said are vastly different. I agree with you. There is a professional
There's
courtesy.
an optics to
Would
it.
I have liked for him to do that? Yes. Does that mean that he did not concede the election? By definition, no. By definition, no.
Anyway, this is the first time it's ever really happened like that. So whenever they were saying they're a threat to democracy, I'm like, what are they talking about? Because all the shit we went through when this guy lost, what are they talking about? And then when Elon Musk was talking about,
Do you think there was some hypocrisy as well? Because you're saying that this is going to be the end of the democracy, but you also had a senile president who stepped down too late, and the vice president was anointed the primary of their party without ever going through a primary process.
he got cocky because the red
Joe?
wave that was supposed to happen,
Joe or Trump?
Joe,
Joe,
because the
okay.
red wave that was supposed to happen
In
in
the
the
midterms,
midterms didn't happen.
didn't
And he's
happen.
like, I got this. He got cocky. He should have been ready to go and have a plan afterwards, because that was his original plan. But whenever Elon, going back to what I was saying, whenever he was on there and he was talking about how they're letting immigrants in, and
Elon
allow-
on JRE?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
And they're allowing them to vote, and they're putting them in all these cities. And if they allow them to vote, we'll never win an election again. And I was like, finally, someone actually gave an argument that I hadn't heard. And I was like, I can see why those people would believe that, because I hadn't heard that. That's the first time in a long form conversation that why would that side be a threat to their democracy? Because if they keep letting people in and they're letting them vote and they're putting them up on your tax dollar, okay, now I kind of see where you're coming from.
It goes farther than that, though, because let's just say, for argument's sake, that every illegal immigrant that stepped into this country did not vote. Just for argument's sake, they could not vote. Tony, do you mind grabbing me a water? I'm so sorry. Do you want a water? Are you good?
I'll drink this.
Would you like more whiskey?
I'm good.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, they could not vote. The census is done on the population, citizen and non-citizen alike. So when you're redrawing the districts for the House of Representatives, it's directly correlated. Thank you so much, sir. Is directly correlated to the population of that land. If the population of New York, San Francisco, Chicago increases, you will then get more representatives. So even outside of the variables that you described, which I also agree with is insane, even if you were to tell me, Arion, there's no way any illegal votes, they still get representation through them just existing in this land, wherever they so choose. And because we do the House of Representatives by population, the Senate in a blanket format, you are benefiting from illegal immigration if you create yourself as a sanctuary city.
And I think they gambled and they won on sending a lot of them to these cities. Because if they would have
When you
lost,
say they gambled, can you
when the
clarify?
Republicans were busing these immigrants to these cities, like, we're not taking them. Here you go.
We'll overload you.
Yeah, that could have backfired if they would have lost, because then they would have gone into that census
Timing,
count,
though,
like you
I think
said.
the census is done in 2026, the next census, or 2028. I
Yeah,
forget.
and
So
then
they had some time.
and then just the stories that came out about them living in hotels on like what's the equivalent of a link card on tax dollars, and
Well, do you think it's genius that they sent them to Martha's Vineyard?
man,
and like,
it was they were playing chess with that one.
Let-
But again, it's you hear all that, it's hard to know what's real. So I was talking to somebody, he's a cop at one of my jiu-jitsu gyms. His parents immigrated here, really good guy. He's not the kind that's like gonna go pick a fight or anything. And he was telling me he was excited about some of these deportations. And he said specifically because in this area there is a certain demographic that they're targeting on these, that when you 80% of the time when you pull them over after 5 o'clock, they're drunk. And this certain segment of the population, if they fit a certain criteria, and I'm being very careful I say this,
yeah.
they're the ones that go after the underage girls in this area and commit a lot
Jesus.
of crimes.
And he was saying this to you, like,
Yes. And he's like, it's a real thing. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have known that unless I had talked to you. He's like, yeah. He goes, it's not all of this culture, not all of this group, but the ones that aren't here for the benefit to help everybody in contributing, they're really bad. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, so at the bare minimum, if we can, there's going to be some problems where people that go shouldn't go, people's grandmothers and stuff. But what if people all of a sudden feel safer to go into the city again? That would be nice.
yeah. I think that everything stems from crime and economics in terms of plight and opportunity. If you have a lot of money, but you can't contain the crime, no one is going to want to invest their human capital, their labor, whatever, because they're scared for their lives. And if you have, peace on the ground, but you don't necessarily have commerce, no one's going to want to live there anyway because there's no opportunity. You have to have both. You have to have commerce and you have to have peace. Because if I'm going to put my roots down, if I'm going to raise my children, if I'm going to invest in the community, I want to make sure that my house isn't getting shot up, that my assets are safe, that my family is safe, that like everything that I'm putting forth into it will be secured by society. Because we all know that we're like a few bad actors away from chaos.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to talk about politics exclusively,
Go for it.
but I do want to do like kind of like this quick, I'm going to just kind of say a couple topics and let's spend like a minute, your position, why? Abortion.
Up to the woman, because it's a complicated issue. It's not something you encourage. You don't want to hand them a punch card and say the third one's free. It's one of those where there's instances where there is the life of the mother and that's going to have trouble. There's stories that my girlfriend has heard where there's been babies that have been miscarried and can't come out. So technically that is an issue, and it can cause, she knew somebody that she had worked on had a family member that bled out, and they lived in Texas because they had a problem like that.
That was the person that died.
Yes.
It was a person in Texas because they did have that, and the fetus was essentially decaying.
People
within
want to act like that's not an issue, and it does happen. The rape should be something to talk about.
Abortion with all the bypasses of rape, incest, and the health of the mother.
Yeah. So
do you believe with abortion? When you say up to the woman, do you mean like up to 9 months as well?
Now that's a different issue. No, at a certain point, you can't just flip your mind like that. Bill Clinton said it once: "Is it should be safe, legal, and rare." That's what I would agree with. Now these instances where they have it up toward the 8th or 9th month, the only thing I've ever seen on that, and I'm sure because everybody has to mess everything up, someone one time was just like, I'm not feeling it anymore, and then it was documented. But I feel bad for those people in the 7th, 8th, and 9th month, because usually it's probably something health related, or the mother can't survive, or the umbilical cord has strangled the baby. Like, you think those people want to have that fight and that argument right now? They're going through enough. I think they should just get out of it, to be honest with you, because there's going to be abuse in anything. If you have to look at it and say which area can we emphasize on and not, because there's always going to be abuse. If you overstep one way and you have a perfectly healthy person that could have lived and had another kid later down the line die because they bled out because of some stupid law you have and they can't leave the border, that's not your business. Like, It's not something that's like should be encouraged or should happen.
Paraded
Or happen often. It's not something that should be
It
celebrated.
should have reverence. It should be a somber moment.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I think they should just stay out of it.
I am also pro-choice, but for a completely different reason. I don't think the government has anything to do with your health care.
Yeah.
I don't want to get a jab mandated on me. Therefore, I can't mandate it on anything to any other woman, with one caveat: viability. And that's where it gets tricky, because with advancements in technology, the viability will become sooner and sooner. So then I add a different caveat to that. I don't want a single dollar of government money going to abortions or preventative care, preventing abortions at all. I want the government completely out of that equation, so that if there is viability, but the state has to make it viable, I don't want tax dollars to go to that. And if the woman wants an abortion, she's going to have to fork over the cash to do it herself, so that they're, at the very least, I understand that there's like the emotional aspect to this and all that, and there is. But there's also statistics. And the people that get abortions, some incredibly high percentage. Tony, do me a favor and double check me on this one. But I want to say it's over 50% of the people that get an abortion once will get a second abortion.
Well, but here's my counter argument to that. And this can be a little bit cold. Is that the type of people you want putting more people into the world? How are they going to grow up? What's their environment going to be?
You're bringing up a very good point, and now we're talking about like the macro and micro versus the micro. Like, what is the value of human life, and is all life divine and has sanctity? I will say that there are aspects of that thought process that are correct, because then it becomes a burden on society and
an unwanted child too.
But then I'll also say you need to create, I can't make it illegal, but I can't incentivize it either. Mm-hmm. If I say to you, oh, you fucked up again, don't worry, we'll cover the cost. Where is the onus on you to stop fucking up? Do you understand?
It is about 40 to 55.
40 to 50.
45 to 50%.
45 to 50% of people that get an abortion will have a second abortion. Thank you so much. And that's nationally, right? Like, granted, some states might be more than others. I'm talking about the average.
Yeah,
so
I'm finding different things, but like that's...
So imagine, for instance, if I were to tell you, okay, first one's on the house. First one's on the house. Up to 9 months, first one's on the house.
Next one, we're going to take a point.
Next one you can't do. Only the first one's on the house. Is that okay?
Well, if we're going to go into like other details there, like that's where I think Planned Parenthood could be a good thing, because they don't only do abortions. They do plan families. They provide access to healthcare if women need mammograms or screenings or birth control. So if we're going to play that route, make birth control more freely available. Don't start peeling that back, access to that back, and then also want what you want at the same time.
So I'm not for Planned Parenthood because of what I said. I don't want a single tax dollar going to it. I don't want a single tax dollar.
What about the other services, though?
Expand.
They do a lot of other services there. So it's not just abortion.
Forgive me.
Like IVF.
Sorry. So let me take back and add a little bit of context to what I'm saying. It's not that I'm saying that I want Planned Parenthoods to go away. I want the abortion part of Planned Parenthood to not be covered by any tax dollars ever.
I don't think it's supposed to. Look up the Hyde Act. What does the Hyde Act cover?
HYDE?
Yep.
Thank you. And perhaps you're right. Maybe no tax dollars go to it, but I don't think that's the case.
It might be federal.
Because I think the way that Planned Parenthood works is blanket cover. It is Congress allots them an annual, not I want to say salary, but they essentially legislate a coffer for them, and then however they choose to spend the money is up to them, up to a certain amount.
Well,
which can include abortions.
Not everybody should have kids. We can agree on that. But
I
then the
agree.
unwanted kids are the ones that are the most abused,
I know, but
beat
would
up,
you,
thrown into the
but
system. It's not a clean cut.
But the question then becomes, like, who are we to decide? Like, would you want to be born unwanted, or would you want to never have life at all? What would you rather have? For me, personally, Jordan, give me a stab at it. Give me a stab at it. Let's see if we can turn lemons into lemonade. that's why, listen, I'm pro-choice because I'm more like libertarian on this thing. I don't want the government involved in the body, but I also would never want me or my wife to get an abortion. But I would also want, if we needed one, to be able to get one. Back to your point with Bill Clinton, safe, legal, rare. I agree.
Hyde Act was for like the big three: rape, incest, life endangerment, and then it also impacted some Medicaid and state funding, like healthcare practices.
Okay.
But it withdrew funding.
It withdrew funding when?
Yeah. 1976.
Oh, so it's like
Been around for a
we're
while.
off.
Yeah.
But it's one of those is like it's always going to be around to argue about, and they'll run on it.
I don't think it's going to be an argument forever. Remember what I was saying earlier about like homosexuality and slavery and sexism and all these other things. I think over the course of time, this is one of the things where it's like there is the moral, there is the religious, the moral argument, and that will never go away. However, these will be the people that don't get abortions anyway. And then it is exclusively the purview of what do you think your federal government has control over. I don't care what the issue is. They don't have control over my body. They don't. Unless I'm in the military. They don't.
So what was the next one? That was the first
Sorry,
one?
so abortion was like the first one.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much kind of eye to eye, even for different reasons. Second, immigration. What do you think about our current immigration policy? Illegal immigration in general? Should we have borders? Should we not? Why?
We should have borders, and this is where they really messed up. And the election and everything, because they wouldn't strongly say it, and they brought on the bill way too late to vote on. You got to have some type of borders and border security, and there's going to be some refugees you let in. Yes, there will be. You don't need to let everybody in. I would like to see. So immigrants that have come here and actually have to get citizenship, they know more about laws in this country than most Americans do. They do. One of my jiu-jitsu coaches, juniors from Brazil, he's lived here for a long time, got his citizenship a couple years ago. He's brilliant in what you would call civics and knowing the law, more so than people that have even grown up here. He did it the right way. He's here and he's producing and he's doing good things.
Is a net positive to society.
Is it our place to kind of take some of this burden off of other people if they're running away from dire places? Yeah, but not all of it, because I would rather, if we're going to go
You're
and
talking about asylum seekers.
yeah, if we're going to clean out any area, why don't we clean out the southern border? Whenever didn't he label the cartels as terrorists?
Yeah, so that we can actually get the military.
Imagine if we cleaned out that area and made it a place people wanted to live.
Two reasons. Number one, that's a mass, like you don't want to mobilize the military because in terms of efficiency of dollars, there are more efficient ways to get that same job done. The reason why, I'll tell you why he did an executive order labeling the cartels a terrorist group is so that he can bypass Congress in allowing for the military to mobilize immediately. That's all the only reason. But you don't want to go through the military. Also, it's kind of like, you're aside from me, the cage, I'm kind of flexing a little bit like, hey, this is what I fucking got. I'm peacocking a little bit like, don't make me fuck you up kind of thing. It's a deterrent for sure. That might be the first time I've ever had to do a pause on the podcast because I got a nosebleed out of nowhere.
I thought it was a pretty calm conversation.
Yeah.
Though,
Well, what happened was Jordan got up and punched me right in my face and said, abortion, what?
No.
So if I start to tame my conversation now, know that it's because he struck me in violent anger.
Your nose had an abortion.
Dude, did you see this? There was a
He had
clot.
a clot, yeah.
Yeah, that was massive. I was like, yo, is that normal? And Jordan's like, no.
It's the dry air, man.
Yeah, it's a hell of a time. I never get nosebleeds. And considering how many times I've been punched, for me to get them from dry air is insane.
I've been getting them a little bit here and there
Really?
because of this. So sometimes at night I'll just run the shower on hot just to put some steam in there.
I did that earlier. I'm not going to lie to you. For like the last 5 minutes of that conversation, I told you this off the record, but I asked him to give me a water because I was like swallowing my own blood. I was like, I hope I'm not bleeding out of my nose. Forgive me.
No problem.
Back onto the conversation at hand. We were talking about immigration specifically, and we were talking about the executive order classifying the cartels in Mexico as terrorist groups so that they can get the military involved. But I'll go a step further, and I'm curious if you agree with me or not. I am for putting tax dollars towards the vetting and adjudicating of our southern and northern border, along with people that are coming in from the coasts, because until we get to a point where our birth rate in this country is supplementing itself, so like 2.1 births per couple, we will need immigration. The only thing I don't want is unfettered, unrealistic immigration where you're bringing in millions upon millions of people in a year. That's unsustainable. You cannot handle that as a country. Think about it. We're 350 million people. If you have 10 million people come in, 15 million people come in 1 year, that's a sizable amount of your population now. And 350 million includes the elderly and children, not just like, adults between the ages of 18 and 40, let's say.
Well, and I'm fine with tax dollars going that because it's a national security issue, really. What Europe is afraid of is like the Trojan horse effect, too. And you see it in some of their bigger cities where they've allowed a lot of immigrants in with good intentions. And then all of a sudden their crime rates grow up. And what sucks is that costs immigration the right way for the right people to be demonized and lumped in with that same thing. It's really a shame because it almost feels like
well, how do you look at someone and point out the illegal from the legal immigrant? You can't.
You don't. And some of these bad actors that are behind the scenes of this, whether it's terrorist organizations or not, they don't view things the same way most people do. They don't view it as, oh, here in a year we're going to get them. They view it as a generational takeover. It's like how the Chinese do. They view it in the longer game than what we do. So if they can slowly get more of their population in, or even have some people that are more radicalized get through, it's a long game for them.
What do you say to the argument that some Democrats have for the illegal immigration as saying, if we don't have this, who's going to pick the crops? Who's going to clean the streets? Who's going to do the jobs that Americans don't want to do? What do you say to that argument? Do you think it holds water?
I think it does hold some. Is it the thing you can foundationally base that argument on? No. Do those jobs pay enough for that? For people that aren't immigrants that are here to make a living off of? No. I think that's one of those good talking points they try to use. But I think that's just trying to simplify it a little too much.
I think it's legal slavery again.
Yeah,
I think it's on par with the H-1B. You're making the idea that these people are working these jobs because they have a choice, when in reality they're being taken advantage of as a cheap source of labor because these companies, these businesses know that these people can't go anywhere else.
Well, and it's
an unfettered H-1B, but for unskilled labor instead of skilled labor.
It makes you wonder what the costs are going to do if we do this, though, because the more we internalize things like this and we're going to bring in, you can't have the cheap labor because, like you said, morally it's wrong.
Force innovation. The same argument was made for emancipating the slaves. Literally the same argument was made. The South, it was called the War of Northern Aggression, not the Civil War, because the South was trying to say like, hey, you're uprooting our way of life. We need slaves in order for our economics to make sense. So what do? After you free the slaves, you innovate. You create additional tools for agriculture. Like you get more efficient with some of the practices that you do. The response is not, yeah, you're right, we need slave labor. The response should be, you should be able to operate a business without needing slave labor.
Yeah, that's a very good
And if you
point.
can't, then you shouldn't be in business.
Yeah, Yep. I wonder if people want to deal with the short-term costs of some of the goods going up as they figure that out, though.
I think inflation is not like a blanket thing, but you bring up a good point, and that's actually the thing I wanted to talk, like the next topic I wanted to bring up was just inflation in general. But this is a good transition. Do you think Donald Trump won the election because of inflation?
No, I think it was a part of it. I do.
If you were to put that in a pie chart, what percentage do you think inflation had in that? If you don't think that it was the main reason, what percentage would you associate with
Do you
inflation?
couple in housing costs in inflation, or are you talking just grocery prices?
When I think of inflation, I think of the CPI index, the consumer price index, yes, but I also think like the total package. when I go to this, when I get gas, it's more expensive because actually technically it's not more expensive than like 2005, but that's beside the point. The total package, everything from interest rates on housing to I know that people might not necessarily think that's inflation, but the Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates in response to inflation. So it is a direct reflection of inflation. If you have inflation, interest rates will go up. So yes, I constitute that as well. So like yes, rent, groceries, insurance, car insurance going up. I equate all of this to inflation, the cost of living.
Played a significant part.
Percentage.
It's hard to do because we're 50-50 anyway. A lot of it, I would even put to the cultural stuff, how that went out of whack that we were talking about. It was a big deal. I think they feel like someone else needed to try.
I think it's 80%.
Yeah.
I think everything else combined is 20%. I think inflation was the majority.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, there's I looked up the houses my parents had bought just for fun. I was sitting next to my dad.
For fun. Did you cry?
No, so whenever we first moved back from my dad was in the military, we were in England. We moved back when I was 5. I've had half a year kindergarten in England, half a year here. And the first house we bought, I looked up what he bought it for because you could find it in the history. It was either on Zillow or Realtor.com. And so I looked up what it was worth now. And then the second house we lived in after that, it's insane. The second house my dad bought in the year 2000, and it had 5 rooms, finished basement, a backyard, $135,000. The house now is worth over $400,000, and we're talking in 24-year difference.
Yeah, but you're also talking about like.
It's crazy though to think about.
I want to say that there's like the inflation rate has a positive attribute towards appreciating assets. Obviously, that's why things like stocks and houses kind of grow with the rate of inflation, because as the money supply increases, the price of these things increases. Assets are inflation resistant. That's why a lot of the people say that the inflation rate is actually a tax on the middle class, because the wealthy have a lot of their wealth tied to assets, not necessarily cash. This is also why I say that there's a time value to money, and that if you're not making your money work for you to any capacity, whether it's $5,000 or $5 million, the savings account, as we know it, is dead. If you have your money in a savings account, congratulations, you're an idiot. Because at the very least, let's say you have like a 3% savings account, like a credit union or whatever, which is an amazing interest rate on a savings account. You're not gaining any money and you're not losing any money, because the year over year, I think inflation rate now, after the last couple of years where it was an insane amount, is like maybe 3 or 4% now.
Yeah, savings account is good for an emergency fund that you need liquid.
Nope.
Then
Line of credit.
See, I'm done with credit.
Why?
Not that way. I just habits I need to correct. So had certain things that I let get out of whack that I had to corral in. So for me, if I have a certain amount of my savings, I'm cool. The rest of it, then I'm going to put into everything else. But if I have this amount of my savings, if my transmission goes out, I'm good. I can pay for it that day. If, work gets so bad that I have to do something about it, I have enough to cover a couple months. And for me, that makes me feel more secure. I mean, you could have it in other areas that are liquid, but I like having it where I can just move it.
Well, I can understand if you were like adverse to like credit cards. I get that, because I think like, anything that's like 28% APR. Personally, the fact that Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders are coming together to pass legislation that will limit interest rates to Tony,
10%.
forgive me again, is it 10%?
10%.
10% seems a little low, not going to lie. If it was like 15%, that would make a little bit more
Pretty
sense.
sure it was 10.
10% is...
That would be great.
Help me. What am I looking up?
Josh Hawley, Bernie Sanders, credit legislation. Just let me know what percentage it was. They're both co-signing on this bill. They're trying to push it. I like the idea of limiting the financing aspects of our capitalistic society, but then the rub becomes what percentages do we all agree on, right? So 10%, that's personally, people are not going to like what I say about this. That's a little low. I think 28% is a little high, like very high. I think 10% is a little low, considering that that's consumer debt. So like, for instance, you can get an auto loan for 5 to 6% if you have good credit, and that's on a depreciating asset. Your house can be 5 to 6%, and it's tied to an asset. To say that, like, consumer debt that at any point you can file bankruptcy on is limited to 10%, I don't know. I'll tell you what's going to happen, and this will be like a pro and a con. You're going to start seeing people with sub 700 credit scores. They're not going to be approved for credit cards. If you're going to cap it at 10%, because the risk assessment is going to come through, someone's going to do the calculations and say, okay, if we're capped at 10% based on our profit margins and our propensity for like these people to declare bankruptcy, we can't give credit cards to people with sub 650 credit scores. And some of these people are the ones that actually need that credit card because it's like interim money in between paychecks. But when people say paycheck to paycheck, what they really mean is credit card bill to credit card bill, because you need that cash on hand. People are still spending money. They're just spending money in advance of the money that they're going to get. Good and bad. But sorry to bring it back full circle about the line of credit and why I think so. A line of credit is slightly different than like a consumer credit card, because the line of credit for me, I'll explain how I use it. So I have a portfolio and I have a checking account. I have multiple checking accounts and then business accounts, right? I have some cash on hand for whatever. I'll use the trucking company as an example. I have a line of credit for $100,000. At any moment, I have a card that I can swipe and I can spend up to $100,000. That is like my oh shit card. Like, oh, the engine broke down. We need to get it towed. We need to get it fixed because the thing, it's going to cost us $15,000. Okay, swipe that card, but it's a line of credit. It's not a credit card. So like I'm limited to how many transactions I have in a month or whatever, you know? Sorry, I'm checking to see if I'm going to have a nosebleed, so forgive me.
Just don't be as passionate and you'll be okay.
Right? The reason I say that is I think there's wisdom in the mentality of saving. You shouldn't spend every dollar you get. But I don't think there's wisdom in holding on to money, because your money should work for you. I truly believe that.
I agree with that.
But if you tie your money into things that work for you, you will give up the liquidity of that. Let's say you invest into a business and you have $10,000 and you get 20% equity of that business. Well, that $10,000 is gone. You have $0 right now. You get 20% equity, and that might give you like some money on a monthly or quarterly dividend or what have you, profitability, profit sharing. But now you're strapped for cash. So instead of giving up that $10,000, maybe you do $5,000 and you do $5,000 on the line of credit. And every month you'll put 1,000 of that into that line of credit to pay it off. Yeah, there's an interest rate and all that, but you're not strapped for cash. If something happens, you have a little bit of cash on hand, or maybe you put the whole thing. I wouldn't put the whole thing on the line of credit, but you don't understand what I'm saying. You have some leeway there. I don't necessarily like the idea of saying the options are save or no credit. I think there's a combination of both. What do you think about that statement?
I don't disagree with you. I mean, you're the finance. But the thing is, for me, and it took a hit because of some things I needed to take care of, but if I have $5,000 in my savings, that's it. Everything else after that is going to go into investments.
Gotcha.
That's how I would do it. But the fact that, if something happens to somebody hits my car, it's done. I can buy a $4,000 car. I don't want another loan. I've done that. I've milked that shit out because I just...
Would you ever lease a vehicle?
No, I don't think so. I'd want it to be mine. It's just one of those things I feel more in control of the next move if I have it in there. And like you said, there's other ways to do it, but I don't want to rely on someone else to do it. I want to be sufficient in that. Okay, I prepared for this. I have a $1,000 bill coming up. Cool. I'll just pull it out of there. I don't have to mess with my budget this month, all that. I have a spreadsheet I put all my stuff in. It's got where I've had 70% of my living expenses are covered, and then the other 30 go to other things. So, and every transaction goes in there. I have the whole thing out because eventually I'm going to have it in the savings where it builds up and I got to dip into it, and then the rest will go to something else.
Gotcha.
But I try to turn it into a simple math equation like that, because if not, I start bargaining over things. And then the budget I've set for something changes because, I wanted that extra restaurant trip, this month. I wanted that steak. I wanted to go get a bloomin' onion, It just kind of keeps my guidelines straighter.
I guess I just look at debt as like, what is it tied to? If you have a lot of debt because you're buying stupid shit, that's bad. But I am over levered. Like, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt tied to assets that make me money. And though I have a lot of money going out in any given month, I have more money coming in because I was afforded that debt. That's the risk that I took. The truck loans, the business loans, and all these other things. I never spent $1 of my own money. I spent somebody else's money, but now that's my responsibility to pay it back. So
Yeah,
I guess
that's playing a game at a different level than I'm at, though. So
you think.
Yeah.
I think.
I
I
got
think if I sat you down,
$100,000. Yeah, I got $100,000 in student loan debt. That's why I don't want to.
Oh,
That's why I don't want to accumulate any more. Because the one thing
I'm
that
so sorry.
the one thing Biden did that was really good was the SAVE Act, which, I paid a percentage of my discretionary income, which basically allowed me my housing, my grocery, and all that. And some conservative judge in Texas nixed it all. So now it's back in forbearance, and it can go on an income-driven repayment plan, which doesn't take in discretionary income, and it can be about $1,800 a month to pay off, which is a mortgage in itself with no house to live in.
Have you made monthly payments, or were there some times where you elapsed in payments? Because I believe, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Once again, Tony, please forgive me. I believe there's a federal. I don't know what shape this takes. If it's like a federal law or if it's some sort of like plan, but apparently it's if you make every month payments for at least 20 years, whatever the amount is left over will be foregone.
That was the SAVE plan.
Forgive me. Okay, so that's what you were talking
Yes, and mine was 25 years because I went to grad school.
about. Okay.
So undergrad was 20, grad school was 25. And so my thing is I see them cutting all this costs and doing all this stuff. Now, some of that's good. What are you going to do for student loans? Don't get me wrong. I was a kid when I got it. I didn't understand what it was. I'm not saying completely get rid of it. I mean, you did get rid of the bank's problems whenever in 2008, and after that, you helped them out. You bailed them out. Can we at least put it at 1% interest rate so that my payments on it make a dent instead of when the interest hits, it goes beyond what I've already paid and I just set money on fire?
This one's a weird one for me because, so full disclosure, I graduated with $15,000 in student loan debt. I went to UMSL, University of Missouri St. Louis, for finance for two reasons. One, they were top 10 in the nation for their finance program. Two, they were $11,000 a year. Like, these were the two things I was like, okay, cool. So I can get my 4-year degree for roughly sub $50,000, including miscellaneous expenses. I would not have gone to college if I had to go to a college that was like $20,000 to $25,000 a year. I just would not have been able to afford it. And I would not have gone to college if I didn't get the Pell Grant and student loan debt. So I have a weird paradigm of this. I think we as a society have to ask ourselves what we are willing to invest in and what we are not willing to invest in. Abortions, I don't want the federal government paying for it. But educating our populace to have a more robust labor pool, I do want to invest in. The problem with this is you're mixing a social reform with the capitalist market, and because we got the government involved in it, higher education costs have only exacerbated, exponentially grown,
especially the
because we're
administrative
inflating
part.
the market.
Yeah.
So I think there's a happy medium. You say the interest rates. I don't necessarily think the problem is the interest rate. I think the problem is the principle. I think the problem is how much money college costs.
Yes, the whole thing is messed up. But I've known people that have been paying on it for 5-6 years, and they owe just as much as they did when they started.
Yeah. Well, that's also because of the principle, right? It's like, I hate to say it this way, but let's say your interest rate was from 4 to 3% on $100,000. Yeah, right now at 4%, you might be making minimum payments and you're not making a dent into it. But even if it was at 3% after 5 years, you may have made like $8,000 dent in that principal. You're more likely to die still from the difference between 4 and 3% than paying off that debt. It's the principal amount that's just too high. No one can articulate to me a reason why higher education should cost more than $10,000 a year. No one can articulate. If you say networking, go fuck yourself. You're an idiot.
I think you can tie most of our problems to financial issues. If someone can't afford a house and they're building all these apartments throughout St. Louis, these big apartment buildings, because they don't want you to own nothing. But if you have student loans, inflation costs are up, you can't afford a house, you're trying to find a stable job. How many people are disgruntled with all that now? And that's why even in 2016, like Bernie Sanders and Trump are leading, because they were seen as the ones that could disrupt that system.
I agree with the sentiment. However, I do disagree with what you were talking about with regards to apartment buildings. Condensed housing actually helps the housing market because it allows for fairer competition. The thing that I think is driving up housing prices more than anything are 3 big banks allowed to buy single family homes.
Yeah.
when you have State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock not purchasing land to build apartments, not exclusively buying 4-family, 2-family homes, duplexes, and quads, but they're buying single-family homes. Oftentimes, they're like the starter homes for people. There is something to be said about the entrepreneur who's a house flipper who will go into an urban environment, perhaps, buy a dilapidated building, invest the time and money to, spruce that thing up, buy it for $50,000, throw in $50,000, sell it for $150,000, pocket the difference, because you're also doing a service to that community. You're taking this, ugly house that's crumbling and you're rehabbing it, so now the government doesn't have to do that, and you're going to pocket a little bit of difference for your troubles. Totally okay with me at the individual level. But how these giant monoliths of finance are allowed to basically soak up asset after asset after asset, there's two variables that go into price: supply, demand. Demand is pretty static for housing, because even if you buy a house, like let's say you buy a starter home, then you're still technically in the housing market for your forever home. Yeah. You get a condo, and then maybe you get a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Then you get like the big family home once you have a wife and kids and whatever.
Yeah. And it's an asset you can leverage to the next move.
Exactly. Whenever someone says like it's better to rent or buy, I'm like, you lying piece of shit. The real value of a home, the real value of any asset that at the very least doesn't depreciate, the payment you're making to the bank less the interest, is equity that you can then borrow against. The difference between paying rent and a mortgage is, if I rent from you for a year at $1,000, after a year I'm out $12,000. But if I'm, financing the house from you, after the year, $12,000 sub, 5% interest rate. So I have money that I could take back from you to the tune of like roughly $10,800. And that's the thing. That's the thing about any asset class. People, the whole tax system, the whole way the W-2 thing works is an affront to the middle class. Even something as simple as the corporate income tax rate was started by Democrats in good faith because they wanted to essentially hose the CEOs and the C-suite from these crazy cash bonuses they were getting. So they came together and say, hey, listen, it's not fair that Jordan Dowdy in his W-2 pays an effective tax rate of like 25%, tiered, right? But the CEO of Microsoft can do a $1 salary and then bonus himself $20 million at the end of the year, and then he pays 10% on that. Because I believe at the time it was like half of the capital gains tax. And that capital gains tax is only between 18 and 20%. So they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to raise that shit to 48%. And everyone was on board for it. Both the middle class, red and blue. And that's why it passed both the House and Senate and got signed into law. That's why the corporate income tax rate is 48%. You want to know what everyone started doing when that happened? Cool, retards. We're just going to pay each other in stock. And then we're going to sell that stock at capital gains. So instead of giving you cash now, I'll give you equity in the company that you can then sell for less than the tax that you get on your W-2. And the best kicker about that is you, me, everybody else that gets a bonus now, cash bonus, because the corporate income tax rate is 48%, we thought we were getting the C-suite, we ended up getting ourselves. Now when you get that $10,000 at the end of the year and it's only $5,600, congratulations, you played yourself.
Yeah, that was some math there.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
Long story short, money works for you. Buy, don't rent. And if you can, don't get a bonus. Negotiate a higher salary. You'll pay less tax in the long run.
And see, that's some of the stuff they should
teach you in school.
Yeah, they should just teach you in school, because I think a lot of people, when they get out, they think they want to rent because then they don't have to cut their grass and don't have to maintain the thing.
There's benefits, but then it's like, some. Do you want convenience or do you want longevity?
Yeah.
And that's for people to decide. If you want to rent, far be it from me to stop you. But you are an idiot. I'm sorry. You should buy. There's, Dave Ramsey and all these other people, they spew some shit that I agree with. But then, like, I'll hear some shit and I'll think to myself, there's no way you believe this. There's no way. You must have a tie or a business or something that benefits from you kind of undermining the meek and the less intelligent. And that, I cannot stand that, because I said it to you once, I'll say it to you again. It's so easy to do it the right way. How much money do you need? Do you need $1 billion? Do you need $5 billion? How much money do you need? Really? Like, if you gave me $5 million, I'm pretty much set. With $5 million, I don't think I have to work a day in my life. I can make things move. I'm good to go.
Yeah, you can make it make money.
To live the way I live now and even more comfortably. And I'm all for greed. That's why I have the painting. It's like, of all the 7 deadly sins, I think it's the least sinful. However, when I start to see people doing it the wrong way in order to get, like, marginal increases, well, now you're a cunt.
So I think it's almost like a drug to them. Ooh. That first hit is great. They won. They got that money. But on a long enough timeline, they just need it anyway. They have to keep going. It's like
They built a tolerance of the wealth that they have.
It's like Stan Kroenke. Whenever he moved the Rams, he made so much money on it. And if he would have just said, look, guys, this franchise, if I move it, goes to the second most valuable in sports. In sports, not the NFL. People would have got that. But then he's kicking people out of land down here in St. Louis that live in houses. How much money do you need? At a certain point, you're just being an asshole. Like, you're good, you're comfortable, you're not doing it for anybody but you. At that,
but you can't force altruism at the same time.
No, you can't. But I mean,
you want him to do right because he wants to do right, not because he's forced to.
Well, and it's like, how much do you need? At a certain point, you're just doing it because it benefits you even this little minuscule amount. If it hurts someone this much, because you're rationalizing it to the point where you can remove emotion from it and be like, oh, it's just a math equation, And we all know someone like that, right? But
I know a lot of people.
I think there's a better way to do it.
I don't know if it's because I grew up poor. I deeply value, admire, and respect people that can acquire wealth. The people that can make money move, that can build something, that can not just finance their way to wealth, but also develop something that can employ people, can empower people. Like the people that can pay paychecks, God bless.
We need those people.
We need those people.
For sure.
Just like we need the employee to fuel that, we need the employee to start that. But then it becomes this weird, it's the same thing that I said earlier of what part does government have in this? And the same way I don't think the government should be in our bodies, the less the government's in our wallets, the better. But we should promote competition. When I think to myself, what place does government have in finance and capitalism? It should be to exclusively promote competition. No other reason.
I agree. So do you think our taxes are going to go down after they find all this abuse and Doge?
No. Yeah. Can I be honest with you what I think is going to happen?
What?
I think the next 4 years are going to be really fucking rough because inflation is not curbed. We printed $7 trillion in less than 2 years. And if you think that that's going to end because Trump got elected, it's not. I think if Trump is smart, he'll do 2 things before the midterms in order to save himself. And that's get immigration under control, start the deportation process, but also fix the legal immigration process because we do have a depreciating birth rate in this country. And there's no systemic way you can grow the economy and also deplete your population. It cannot be done. You have an aging population that's going to need Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and you're going to need a pool of labor to fund that. Second, the next 2 years, if they can do those, the second thing that they should do is also peace in the Middle East and stop fucking bombing brown people. If you can halt the hostilities in Israel, granted some of that is also Iran, stop the bloodshed in Ukraine and Russia, and also create some sort of denuclearization or hegemony between the poles, right? So like you have the Eurasian Peninsula with China and Russia, then you have the Western Hemisphere with the U.S., Mexico, Canada. The 3 things that you really need to do is stop Israel from bombing brown people, stop Ukraine from thinking that they can actually win this war because everyone understands they can't. They have no industrial base. We prop them up. And when 50% of the money doesn't even go to the Ukrainian military, where does it go? That's insane. You give them $280 billion, 130 of it to 150 of it goes to the actual military, go fuck yourself. You're not getting any more money. And then last, you have to realize that there's other world players in our globe, and America has lost its ability to just throw its weight around. I'm not saying that Russia and China are on our level. They're not. But BRICS might be. When you start putting these big players together like India, China, Russia, Mexico, Brazil, lots of labor sources, lots of natural resources. America starts to have to figure its shit out. That's the first two things it needs to do in the next 2 years. Fix immigration, both legal and illegal, and then start to promote peace and prosperity. Stop fucking bombing all these poor people, please. If they can do that, I think they survive the midterms. But then the next 2 years needs to be starting to set the groundwork and starting to be honest with the American people. I hate to say it this way. Unless you have some sort of AI revolution that completely revolutionizes and creates another exponential growth pattern in an economy similar to the Industrial Revolution, we will eventually hit bankruptcy. We will not be able to do Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, a $1.2 trillion Defense Department budget. The servicing of our debt alone, because we issued so much short-term paper over the course of COVID, that a lot of that is going to come in for refinancing now under the new rates of the Federal Reserve, 5%. Good luck. Good luck.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. And you know, here's the problem. Here's the unsexy truth. It took us roughly like 20 to 25 years to get here. And if you think that Trump's going to do it in 4, or like even if J.D. Vance gets elected the next 2 terms for another 8 years of Republican control, you'll have half the amount of time that it took to cause this issue to fix it. It's not going to be done. We have systemic issues in America from a plethora of perspectives. I'm not saying that red and blue. I'm talking about there is a fundamental rot in how we do things. And if we don't change something in the next year or two, and I hope to God that Trump is the catalyst for that, or at least to start the conversation, we will not be able to do anything about this, because you're going to get to the point where you're now going to have to increase taxes. And increasing taxes has always resulted in a regression of economic growth, and you're going to start to siphon from the people. And then people will have to sit there and recoup history and realize that government has never created anything. It has only taken from creators. Now, it serves a purpose in certain aspects, but it has never created anything.
Yeah, it's it's a real mess. You know, as much taxes as we pay, I don't think I should have to go get my license and pay another additional licensing fee. I think all that should be handled. You know, if you want to go fishing, you have to go pay and get a fishing license. It's just all the nickel and diming of us. And then whenever you see all the abuse of it, which we knew what was going on, like it should be transparent as it is, that we see where it's going. But, you know, people freaking out right now. And like I was telling you before, it's hard to know what's real and what's not right now as they unearth this stuff.
I give it 2 weeks on everything. I have stopped immediately responding to everything. It takes about a week to 2 weeks for the truth to actually come out. Because I think right now what it is there's just so much misinformation and malinformation, and people are so worried about getting those initial hits and likes and shares and stuff like that, because grifting is profitable, that now I just give I don't have an opinion on anything until at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks is my threshold.
Because it all reads like memes.
Yes. There's no way this is true. There's a headline and it's like, okay, 50% of this is true, but the other 50% is like obtuse. There was one article where, so Trump sued MSNBC because of the interview that they did with, or not Meet the Press, sorry, it was Meet the Press or something like that. It was some news agency, forgive me. Tony, one more time, forgive me. Google.
CBS.
CBS, thank you. It was the CBS interview with Kamala
minutes.
Harris. 60 minutes, correct. 60 minutes. He sued them for $100 million. The news article writes like, Donald Trump getting paid by mainstream media. And it's like, no, they took him to court and won because you took a 3-hour interview, put it to 60 minutes, and then you never released the full unedited version until after the election that showed how dumb this woman was.
They chopped the clips and moved it around. The makers,
we do that editing, Tony, for this podcast in our clips. And I try my hardest. Like, if you've noticed our clips for our podcast, they're all like one, like a coherent, like it'll be 30 seconds and we might chop off like the ums, the likes or whatever, but then it's 22 seconds, but it's one coherent thing. It's not like I'm taking words you're using to make you say something you're not, which is literally what they did.
Well, what they did was they
paired answers with questions that they didn't ask her for that.
They used a different answer from a question for a different
question,
and then moved that answer to a different
to bring it back full circle. So there's a news article saying that Donald Trump is getting paid by mainstream media. No, he took him to court because of essentially fabricating an interview and won. That's the reality. But if you only read that news article, you'd think, oh, Donald Trump was double dipping here. I thought he was against the mainstream media, fake news, quote unquote. You need time to digest this, and the average person is just too busy trying to stay afloat.
Yeah, and I used to kind of react to things as they dropped, but
You can't.
anymore when I step back from it, you don't even know what's real. It's got to see it, and
How hard is it not to
elections have
argue on social media?
consequences. What's that?
How hard is it not to argue on social media?
I don't anymore because I just know the names and the faces, and they've already made up their mind.
Yeah.
And if you bring any nuance to it, fuck you. It's like.
Both sides.
But
Both sides.
yeah.
Do it.
And one thing I will say is people have to be really careful how far they push their thing, because a pendulum goes this way and this way. You push your stuff too far this way, you're going to get a backlash, because the ones who will decide it will be the independents.
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with now
We
with a
sway
lot of
with
the
the wind.
social issues. The pendulum is coming back, and in some degree, it really needed to, or it was going to get out of hand. And what sucks is there will be people that'll be impacted by it, but some things, they get out of hand on both sides. So when Liz Cheney and everybody that was all right wing warmongers started coming over to the other side, it kind of made me go, that's interesting.
Well, the fact that they were welcomed with open arms.
Yeah, like, oh, you're on our team now, without any other discussion on that. Now I step back as a moderate independent and was like, that's
Fishy.
interesting. Like, what's
Did you
going on
ever think
here?
you'd see the day where the Democratic Party is hailing Dick Cheney?
Well, yeah, no, I did not. But
Neither
as soon
did
as
I.
he came over, yeah, and that just shows you what strange times we live in right now.
I think power wants to succeed itself. And that what do people with money and affluence and power fear? Losing it.
Yeah, so they'll do anything they can to stay in power, which is why I wish term limits were a thing.
I go back and forth on that. You don't want to kick a CEO out of doing a good job if they're doing a good job out of 8 years.
Yeah, how many are doing a good job
I
there?
think the system in place is actually the best one. I do blame the populace. When Mitch McConnell can win re-election year after year after year, do I blame Mitch McConnell? No, I blame the people that fucking voted him in there.
Well,
At what point do we start to blame the populace? I mean, truly.
well, that doesn't change unless you do literacy tests, but that's a bad thing you can't do because
You
of
got the right to
history.
vote if you're a citizen.
Yeah,
you're over
exactly.
a certain
So
age.
I don't know what you do, to be honest with you.
We're going to transition out of this because I don't want this whole conversation to be about politics. Thank you for entertaining me on this one, but I don't want to necessarily only go down this path. So if you're okay,
Yeah.
do you mind if I pivot?
Yeah, absolutely.
I see the CX BJJ shirt on. I know that you've competed a couple times for
Yeah.
Adam
Sella.
Sala's promotion, but recently you've been kind of more on the officiating side. You're going to be competing again anytime soon for CX BJJ?
I would like to. So everybody, you should do all the local tournaments you can. Adam's built a really good product here. If you're a fighter, you need to be doing these. All competition's good competition. You know this from wrestling experience. And he's going to be doing a tournament, open weight at black belt, where the finalists are on the next show. And the winner gets $1,500, I believe. So that's good incentive. But
how many black belts are signing up? Like, what's the cap? Is it like a 16-man bracket?
I don't remember off the top of my head. It could be 8, 12, 16. It's open weight. I definitely would like to do it. I'm dealing with kind of a little bit of an injury right now. I'm hoping I can get under control and then go with it. I've been injured before and competed. I just get in shape and I go, and then it stays with you. It's just you have to do certain things. But Adam's done a really good job with this and trying to build it up. He just needs more people locally to get into these tournaments. But you've been to those shows. Those shows are great.
Well, I agree with you 100% when you're talking about like MMA fighters and branching out to the individual disciplines. For me, I was a wrestler, so I had a really tough time with the stand-up, so my coaches made me do some amateur boxing, and it made the world of a difference in my mixed martial arts. So I would stress that to anybody. Obviously, this is more geared towards the grappling aspect, but if you're a boxer and you're thinking about getting into MMA, compete in jiu-jitsu. And if you've maybe done a little bit of boxing, a little bit of jiu-jitsu, or sorry, a little bit of wrestling, but maybe you're not like pushing the jiu-jitsu, force yourself into that different discipline where you're forced under a certain rule set to perform in a certain way. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and you'll never be uncomfortable in a fight.
Yeah, don't be afraid to lose in a specialist world. Dip into that specialist world. You're not going into a kickboxing match. Where if you're not equipped, you're going to be knocked out. But, and to your point, I remember you when you started doing more boxing matches, you were knocking people out. And that's when you knew, okay, I'm ready for the next level because you
But I needed
up.
that. I needed that for
Yeah.
my own mental.
And so jiu-jitsu is just fun. Like a lot of these guys turn things down. The only thing that's really kind of holding it back to me is visually when you go and these guys are just sitting to their butts and scooting the whole time. It's just not. It's a good skill set. It's very good as part of the game, but it's not something I want to elect to watch, and it's hard to sell tickets to.
I this is the problem with me. I love martial arts, and I can appreciate the strategy, and I can appreciate the technique and what it is that they're trying to do. Simultaneously, I can fully understand how that makes for a lesser product for like a promoter to sell to the general populace. And if your goal is to grow a sport like martial arts, it's two-pronged. One is the education process that is kind of like bestowed upon the gyms. The gyms will educate the people. But then the promotion's job is to kind of facilitate that excitement factor. Like put people together that will force motion, or at the very least, create a rule set or a system in place that forces that. Maybe you do a BJJ show where you outright ban pulling guard. You can't pull guard. I've never seen that before, and maybe no one's ever going to do it. But what I'm trying to say is play with the fucking system a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's no real set rule system that I've watched and been like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Because some of them emphasize points, then stalling. Some of them emphasize submission only. Who cares about anything else? But there's just something to me about, you always view being on your back as a position that you've lost. So if you negate the neutral position, why is there no penalty?
Yeah.
Now I have to engage with that or I get penalized. I've never understood or agreed with that part of it.
Scoring it is very difficult because ultimately, visually speaking, submissions can seem like they're deeper than they actually are, or that you were closer to actually that, tapping position. In reality, only you in that position and you giving that position know whether or not you're really that close or not.
Are like tournaments like that scored differently, like from tournament to tournament, or is there like a universal scoring system?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Our producer's essentially asking like, how is the scoring system of BJJ done? Right now, I mean, you are a ref and judge for CXBJJ, so if you don't mind, how do you guys do it under Adam's show?
They use the IBJJF rule set, which there's tutorials out there I watched before I first started reffing. It was very helpful because it kind of shows you the little in-between points that are kind of very discretionary. And then there's the submission
So are you
only.
calculating points in your head and keeping track?
Yes, and sometimes someone will be holding a guillotine attempt as someone gets taken down, and really it'd be 2 points, but they don't get the 2 points until the submission's let go. And then there's advantages in there. It can get really complicated, and it's something you need to know if you're competing, especially at the higher level, because me and my coach Nick, whenever we grapple, we keep internal score, and it's funny because I'll kind of playfully talk shit with him because it's just fun, and he beats me 99% of the time. But every now and then, I'll get ahead, and then I'll just sit to my butt and grab his gi and just stall the last 30 seconds, and I'll win on an advantage, and I'll be like, got your ass, finally, for the first time in a year. And it just comes down to knowing what's scoring, what's an advantage, and what are the areas where you kind of need to chill for a bit and then progress.
Let me ask you this, though. If you're incentivizing certain acts in jiu-jitsu, then aren't you just creating a sport and moving away from the martial art?
Yeah, and that kind of is what happens with all of it over time as more people get into it because they want more avenues to compete.
Do you think jiu-jitsu is becoming karate?
No, because there's something really weird about jiu-jitsu, or not jiu-jitsu, taekwondo and karate, where I'll talk to people and they're like, yeah, my kid's got a black belt. And I'm like, your kid's 10 years old and he's mastered a martial art.
Yeah.
Like, no, don't get me wrong. there is a McDonaldization of jiu-jitsu. There's some gyms that have different requirements.
Being
and
able to get a blue belt online.
they give certain things out that maybe they shouldn't sometimes, but who am I to give that? My thing is competition always shows where someone's at.
Yeah, but what if someone never competes?
Then it's hard to give it. It really is. I think everybody should compete. Do you have to? No, but I think it's good to put it out there and see where you're at. But what I think is most impressive about jiu-jitsu is, the guy I train with that has 3 kids who brought his kid into class and then was like, that's cool. Maybe I want to get into this. Maybe me and my kid can bond over it. Hasn't done anything since high school sports, is 42 years old and goes out to a local tournament. That's balls.
Yeah.
That, we stepped into a cage and fought, but we were young and mean and we were ready for it. But imagine that. Like, that's cool to me. That's courage. Those guys inspire me even on the days where I'm like, man, I'm tired. I don't feel like it.
Do you get the same drive for jiu-jitsu that you had for fighting?
It's different. It's more fun. Like,
You're not getting punched in the face.
Yeah, people turn down matches, and I'm like, what are you doing? It's just a grappling match. Like, you either win or you lose. It's fun. I do miss some aspects of fighting. I don't miss the obsession over it, but
God bless.
I miss the sole focus of having to focus on one big task. And whenever you were locked into that cage, nothing else mattered. Not how much was in your bank account, not the arguments you had with somebody, not that you had to go to work on Monday, but you had to. But in that moment, I have one task, and that in itself was freeing, because then everything else just fell off of me. Now I had to put myself in a high-stakes situation to get there, but I mean, that was just the highest high, right? Especially if you came out on top. And it was just the strangest thing whenever it was over, and then you had to go back to work on Monday,
Sometimes getting, because I'm only 2.5 years removed from it, I don't think I miss fighting. I think I miss who I was, because I'm a fundamentally different person. I'm just less, there's just less animal in me. I've become civilized.
I think that's natural. And it was when I talked to Adam, and I said, Adam is a handful in jiu-jitsu. He was that guy for a while there that, like, you would kind of let work a bit, but you couldn't too much because he was really getting good. And there's been rounds he's put it on me. He's gotten really good. And to me, I sit there and I think about where we're at now in our grappling, and what if we would have had that when we were actively competing. And so the thing I always say is, the price of the wisdom we have was our youth.
Yeah.
And now these guys, if they're able to be coachable, can get it so much younger. And, there's a part of me, I still think every now and then I would really love to just do another one. I turned 39 this year. It'd be funny to do one at 40 just out of spite. But
A fight?
yeah, I would do it differently, though. I couldn't train every day. I would probably do every other day pretty hard. The other day's low-end cardio.
Why would you want to?
Just to do it. My first coach, Steve, he fought at 48, and he thought it was crazy. He's like, I don't know why all these national media people are getting a hold of him. I'm like, Steve, it's because you're 48 and you're fighting a professional fight. He's like, oh, yeah. I mean, it would be more just to prove a point to everybody, because, I can run off pride and spite all day, but it'll be, 1, I can. 2, I'm gonna. 3, fuck you, because all you people, wait till you're my age. Okay. I am your age. Watch.
But what if you lose? Is that not in the effort to kind of prove those wrong? Would you not be proving them right? Or maybe it goes deeper than that.
I don't even entertain that thought.
But what if it's something that?
I mean, that's kind of what you sign up for. That's the thrill of it. But unless you bring me a killer, they ain't beating me. The only caveat is I'd have to put out there now, because I'm not going to be dishonest, is I am on hormone therapy now, because I did, you had Jeff on here. I use Whitmer rejuvenation because I took a bad concussion that was not recovering me enough. But as long as people are willing to know that, and I would even give blood details and anything like that in a theoretical situation where I do come back, then there's no excuse. Then But here's the other thing. I weigh 230 pounds right now. So
That's heavyweight now. Yeah.
yeah, so I've fought
Would
at
you wanna cut weight?
170. I've fought at 85. I've fought at 205. It'd be kind of fun to do a heavyweight one. Yeah.
You're a ballsy man because that's whenever I start to get that itch. Whenever I start to get that itch, the reason I prevent myself is because I say to myself, I'm a buck 80 right now.
Yeah.
I'm 180 pounds, and I fought at 135. I don't have the discipline, the time, nor the inclination to do what is needed to cut that 50 pounds. I just don't care enough. And I don't want to fight 145.
Yeah.
Don't want to fight 155. Definitely don't want to fight 170.
Well-
so like that's what stops me is the weight classes.
Well, and I might just be talking shit that it'd be fun one day, but the things that would stop me is all the other things that didn't make it fun. The fucking
selling tickets,
selling
and
tickets,
cutting
and
weight.
having to promote it, and one thing I started to really hate toward the back end was waiting all damn day to fight.
Yeah.
Like, especially
It sucks being the main event.
yeah, you get up at 7 and you're like, well, shit,
You're not gonna fight till
it's the
10:30.
longest. It's the longest day.
And they make you get there at the
longest day.
same time. You gotta
Yeah.
get there at like 4:30, 5 o'clock. You're not fighting till 10.
And then you never feel the okay, I'm ready to go until that blowout beforehand. And then you warm up and nobody can touch you. You're invincible. You're gonna go take care of the business. But you don't wake up feeling like that. You wake up like, oh, I gotta time this meal right. What do I weigh? And you have to keep running to use the bathroom because you just feel all these fluids back in your body. That's the worst part. I wish we could just fight during the day or fight the night of. Those things around it are things I generally just hated toward the end for sure.
I can understand the people that have retired from the UFC that want like a Legends division or something. Because if you told me I could get other fighters that are done fighting to agree to not train for a fight, show up night of, and just like, fuck it, what do you weigh? Like 180. All right, we fought at 135, but you and I are both like 175 right now. Let's just decide to fight fat and out of shape. I would fight.
Well, I think a Masters League would be something cool and fun. I mean, the sport's already oversaturated as it is, so why not bring back some interesting dynamics with some of the older fighters that come back? It's just
The problem is the state's involved now.
yeah.
You can't have it the way when we were coming up. It was the wild, wild west, dude. I remember those early Jim Jenkins shows, Heart of St. Charles Banquet Center, Shady Jack's outdoor events and things like that. The state just wasn't involved in it, and the sanctioning bodies were completely separated. So, like, you could get away with some pretty wild shit.
Well,
Now it's a completely different game.
in a way, all the innovation we wanted is here, and I kind of miss the good old days.
I do too.
Because these guys just
I'm sorry, Tim. I love you. I think Tim does a great job.
why is it so hard to find guys fights now? You know, we just
I know why. Mike Rogers said why.
yeah, they're just protecting the
You don't need to have tough fights anymore.
No,
You have to be exciting. We approached the game in a wrong way. We assumed that fighting was like every other sport where if you wanted to be the best, you had to beat the best. We were wrong. We were wrong.
See,
It wasn't about that.
I had a lot of like I was gonna prove y'all wrong in me. Like
A chip on your shoulder.
yeah, I wanted everybody to know, like, even when I was an AME, I'm the top dog here. Like, that just was what I wanted to be. When you knew you wanted a tough fight at 170, I was the guy. Or 85 at the time. And the same as a pro. But, you know, there was always guys in the area that we shuffled as pros. There was a lot of good talent in my generation there. So I was older than most of them, but you know what I'm saying there. Like Adam Meredith and Buckley was around, and all those guys were at 170.
Sanchez was around for a minute before he left the St. Louis scene.
Yeah, it was good. I do kind of miss the good old days, and you know, even now I don't spar very often, but when I do, even some of the guys that are at the top level when they come through at the gym, they're very good. I'm not outclassed by any means. So there's a part of me that's like, you know, I don't have that same drive like you were saying before, so it would have to be something fun. But if I could change
money, would money entice you in any way, shape, or form?
yeah, money would definitely do it. Give me 10 grand, yeah, I'll fight anybody.
Yeah.
But the only real regret that I have is the 2 years I was kind of shelved in my prime. I'll never get that back. You know, and everybody can say water on the bridge, we grow up and all that, but if time's the most valuable thing you have and you have less of it in a sport, especially a professional sport, I'll never get that back. So, but I do think, I was thinking about this whenever you were talking with Jeremy on that, is You know how
Second or-
much it's
first or second
changed,
episode?
Jeremy Johnson, the second one.
Sorry.
It might have taken what happened to me to let people know not to sign those contracts because you don't hear about them anymore.
Yeah, they're gone.
And there were
Not
so
just-
many people I
Not
talked
just
to.
you, not just you, but there was a plethora of people that were kind of, there were negative aspects of those 3-fight contracts. And yeah, they died after that. If you noticed, we were like the only people that signed them, and then they just went away.
And there were so many people I went behind the scenes or reached out to me that I gave my story to and I talked to, and I was like, don't do it. Don't do it. So if there was anything that came from that, it was making sure other people didn't fall into that, because that's not anything I could get back. So that was the only factor I could control afterwards, make sure everybody else after me didn't get stuck with that.
I feel weird about this one, Jordan, because I signed those contracts as well. I signed the exact same contract that you had, like the 3-fight exclusivity clause with Shamrock, with the exception of Bellator, UFC, and then it was like any other major promotion like ONE FC or even LFA. And I had no negative repercussions. That does not make them good nor bad. I guess the only reason I'm bringing that up is because we both did something very similar and had completely different outcomes, right? My question is not, should they be there or anything like that. My question is, I want to be careful how I ask this. If you were to do a pie chart of who was at fault for how that ended up ending up, okay? So like the relationship, the dissolution of that relationship. How much do you think was them? How much do you think was you?
I put it all on them.
100% on them?
Yeah.
Do you think there's ever been a case ever in history where that's the case, where it's like 100% someone else's fault?
No, I can see what you're saying, but I also kept the dialogue open. Here's who I want. Here's why. Oh, no. Okay. Well, this person and this person had them. Oh, you're going to offer me this person. Well, I asked their coach. No, we weren't offered that fight. Okay. What about this and this? No. Okay. Well, I'm in this portion of my contract, and these people will give me this fight that I've been asking you for multiple months. And then you're going to be dishonest and try and hold it against me, and then milk that out and try to take me to court. You know this. There was a fight I fought for free because I needed to fight. Otherwise, I wasn't going to have one for a handful of months. But I'm only exclusively signed with you. It's your job to give me fights. And it's just, the whole thing was just messy, and it was stupid, and it shouldn't have been done that way. And I feel like the way I was communicating could have been received better because I was never really combative. I just wanted my opportunity because I knew I was in a shorter window than most people. I was older than everybody else. I was 32 to 34, and the other guys in that weight division were 29, 28. They were Buckley's age. He's still in his prime, killing it, because he had a lot more time than I did. So I was trying to get somewhere quicker because I had to. And it's all retrospect now. I mean, I can't get that time back. It's gone. And all I can do is try and guide people away from the same mistake, which luckily that stuff has gone away now.
Yeah, you don't hear about it anymore.
No, it's dumb, but
We were saying something about like wanting some of the good old days back, but I mean, when I objectively look at it right now, there was also a lot of fuckery done back then from all the promotions, Fight Hard, Jim Jenkins, Jared Block when he had his. I'm not saying that times are better or worse depending on who you're asking, but I will say that at the very least, it seems like, at least from my perspective, you can fight for whatever promotion you want, whenever you want. If the fight is right, yada yada. The fighter seems to have a little bit more leverage than previous generations of fighters. And you're seeing, Marlene was on and she was talking about how like there's kind of this scarcity of fighters wanting to fight fighters, and Marlene was not the only person to make that comment after that clip was posted. There was a couple promotions that messaged me. Some people just outright made comments on the thing.
And that's true. It's tough out there now. And
yeah, but here's my response to that. At the amateur level, you're not paying them.
No.
At the pro level, I get some of the anger and frustration, but at the amateur level, They're not making $1.
And it's harder to do that now because the cost of living and everything has gone up.
Well,
But
also the state got involved, so now the fighters have to pay for their blood work and all this other stuff. It's good that they're having to do that, but these are expenses I didn't have when I was coming
and
up.
we had the smaller gyms around. We had CMMA, we had CMAA, the sister gym, and then if you look
Burger,
at
St. Charles.
yeah, but I'll even go to Illinois because there's no real gyms in Illinois anymore
There was
except
Hit
for Alton.
Squad and
Yeah, there was Hit Squad, there was War Room, then you had Generation Studios, that was Clay Mitchell's gym over there. You had an entire pool of, and those guys, they would fight every month. All these guys would, and that's just not around
Johannes'
anymore.
gym with Montois Prater and all them.
Yeah, it's the gyms in Illinois have really dried up. You still have Alton over there.
The gyms in St. Louis have dried up.
Yeah, and
There's only like 2 or 3
it's
real gyms.
consolidated a lot, but there were more opportunities, but like we could fight more often. That's the part I miss the most about it, and what I think has happened a little bit, and this is just the evolution of the sport, is there's a lot of athletes that have gotten into it now. Not just like gifted athletes, but even privileged ones. Their families have money, and I think that's taken a little bit of the toughness away from the sport. Just the best guy doesn't always win. Sometimes it's the toughest guy, the guy that finds a way.
I don't know if I agree with that, dude, because the guys have never been better.
No, they've been better, but they're not as mean.
What variable constitutes when you say mean? Elaborate.
I think that's why you get a lot of guys that don't want to fight each other now because they're protecting their records. Whereas before we were mean.
Yeah, but that was ego. What you're saying is mean.
Yeah,
is
but that can be
ego.
tied to meanness.
Yeah, but like you weren't a mean guy, dude.
You
You were friends with almost everybody you fought.
Yeah, but that side of my personality I let out in that moment.
Okay, so you were mean for a moment, but I
Yeah.
would make the argument that everybody that gets in the cage is a savage for those 15 minutes.
They can be. I just think there's more athletes in it than fighters now. They all fight. Everybody wants to be a fighter, but there's more athletes in it now than fighters.
I will concede that it is become more of a business even at our level. I agree with you there. But I do not concede the ground that the fighters are in any way, shape, or form less mean or ego-driven than we were. I think they're just smarter.
Maybe in a way, but I think the guys...
Bro, I hate to say it this way. We didn't make it.
Yeah, that's
So we
true.
had ego and mean and all this other stuff, but we didn't make it.
But the guys that have the meanness to them, I think, stand out a lot quicker.
Yeah, but what's the point of standing out?
Julius Walker, nicest guy in the world. Mean as fuck when he fights in the UFC now. Ray Hayes, that guy he's a fighter. Look where he's gotten so quick. He runs through people.
I'll concede
Clark, nicest guy in the world. Loves anime. Likes nerdy stuff. Plays video games.
Same with Tavon. Tavon was a culture shock for me.
Yes. That bell rings. They're mean. They are fighters, but they are mean.
Yeah, but so were we.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like as the sport has progressed, it's become more available. There's more avenues to move up. I think there's more athletes in it than fighters.
Let me ask you a different question in a different way. Imagine we, with the skill sets that we had when we had them, were coming up now. I think I'd get smoked.
I would disagree because your coaching would be upgraded. The coaching is upgraded.
I disagree. I had Jay D'Amato. I had Mop. When I had Mop, I had Mike Rogers. I had really good coaches. Well, and in the St. Louis area, I would make the argument that those are still the coaches. Jay D'Amato, rest in peace. I had a great, phenomenal first coach. Mike Rogers is still doing the damn thing. Mop is still doing the damn thing. I would actually make the argument that the coaches would still be present. My coaches were so good that they're still doing it.
See, I would argue you would still find a way because your room would have been upgraded. You'd have become better, quicker.
Okay. I would still make the, I don't know, man. I guess what I'm trying to say in a weird way is like, we were good when we were good. We weren't as good as we wish we were. But I also say that I think the competition level is just so vastly better than when we were coming up.
Well, I think our generation, the Adam Merediths, me, you, Chell Irwin Davis, I mean, we could go on with names, even, like a Ray Grindstaff, if he would have stayed consistent.
The generation before us, the Sampos, the Alp, the Lance Benoit,
Yeah, but I think
Fred
if we would have had
Zach Freeman, forgive me, Fred Freeman.
If we would have had the Iridiums calling on us when we hit 4-5-0, I think our avenues would have been a lot
4-0,
different.
are you kidding me? They're calling on amateurs now.
Yes, so we didn't have
Joe
that
Warden's
before.
son's Talon
Yeah,
Warden
so
is signed with Iridium now. When he told me that, I was like, holy shit, that's insane.
I think the only
in
thing
a good way.
I think the only thing we were missing was the network because we were stuck in the local promotion beefs.
I agree. But that's what I mean by like, we were wrong. We thought that we needed to beat everybody around us to get signed. And I know that for me, I did do that. Like I beat everybody around me at 135, then I bumped up to 145 and beat them, and then went pro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
and I still was like, I felt like at an arm's length always because I didn't have that networking. You're correct, but it wasn't. Our approach just was wrong.
Brad Marlene are around when I'm in my prime, like starting as a pro, and I'm an independent contractor and go any which way, and they have contacts up through the LFA. I think it's very different.
Yeah, I do
Now,
agree. I do agree with that.
It's a good thing those relationships are built now because everybody behind us that works and gets there, they have a path, and I'm really glad for that. It's the argument of like Michael Jordan, right? Was that era just tougher or was he better? I think you put anybody like that in any type of environment, if they have it, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
To a much lesser degree, if you're just someone that is going to work hard and dedicate yourself and put it in there, I think no matter what generation you find yourself in, you'd figure it out. The toughest generation was the one before me, the one before Sal. Those guys were fighting in gyms.
Yeah.
In the old no holds barred.
Behind the gym, the pavilion.
Yeah, and
was getting it in wherever they fucking could.
So every level of it progressed it further. But now I think a lot of that toughness that was, all that some people relied on to win has left the game a bit. The ones that have both of it together are really good. That's why you see a lot of these guys that are super talented with 500 records as an amateur.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a different paradigm than I have, Jordan, because you're also helping Sean Woodson, so you're also seeing the top echelon of that sport. And you kind of have a purview that I just, quite frankly, don't have. How has that helped illuminate some of the stances that you have, some of the positions that you hold? Is some of that in some way, shape, or form shaped by the proximity to Sean being close to the UFC now? And I hate to say it this way, and forgive me if it sounds insulting, but in a lot of ways you get to kind of see from the passenger seat what you wish you were driving into.
Yeah, no, it makes sense what you're saying. I think a lot of people, if they were given the right opportunity in their time, in their prime, would have had a good shot in the UFC. I think it was a lot of it is
From our area?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's getting in the door. Now, Sean is a phenomenon. With his record and what he's been able to do and his skill set. I'm not saying everybody here would have gone up and made a title run, but I definitely think everybody could have gone up there and won a fight. And when I say everybody, I mean maybe the top two in each weight class in this area, because we were always kind of undervalued. And St. Louis is in general, especially in jiu-jitsu, when we travel and we compete in national tournaments, our area does really well.
Well, we're doing really well right now in the UFC between Charles Johnson and Evan Elder.
Those guys
Sean
went
Woodson,
11-0
Joaquin
last
Buckley.
year.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
In a great way. Now we're getting even more guys signed, like Julius Walker. I know it's not necessarily like a St. Louis. I think the state of Missouri, right? So like Ray Hayes, he's not really a Kansas City guy or a St. Louis guy. He's a Springfield, Missouri guy. Doesn't matter. If he gets signed, both cities are going to cheer for him. You know what I mean?
But it's seeing it up there, it's definitely an upper level. And there's some people we've shared locker rooms with that I'm like, whoa, that guy's on another level. And there's people we've shared locker rooms with that I'm like, okay.
Older fighters?
Just all over the gamut, really,
Yeah.
Because it's like Mike was telling you in his, it's more about who's entertaining, who can get the knockouts. They don't want to see a lot of grinding away at 3-round decisions. It's become a lot different of a game, and it's also kind of oversaturated. I'm glad there's more opportunity for more people, but I do miss the days when I was younger and there was one pay-per-view a month and one fight night on Spike TV, and we all got together and we would watch it, and you basically knew the top 15 in each weight class. And, you lose a lot of that as things get better and there's innovation, and that's a good thing because there's more pay, but man, you got excited for it back then.
I actually think that's by design, not necessarily due to volume, but because the UFC, ever since Conor and Ronda, are now more in the business of promoting the brand UFC than promoting any individual fighter.
Yeah. And that is a brand that is unchallenged.
Right.
There is no number two. Bellator had a chance, but they had a horrible name, and you never knew whenever their fights were on. And
dude, I feel like everyone is so awful at promoting.
Yeah.
Like everyone is so awful at it. I never know when a PFL is happening. I never knew when a Bellator was happening. Sometimes I know when an LFA is happening only because guys that we know are fighting on it, sharing the stuff. So it's like a proximity bias. I know that every weekend for at least every other weekend or every weekend, there's going to be some sort of UFC event somewhere, whether it's the Apex, whether it's a fight night, or whether it's a pay-per-view. I think I agree with what you were saying about the old feeling of like this culminating moment, that 1 month at one UFC. But I will also say that like I do like the fact that like, because I like watching fights, that every weekend I pretty much have like those 3 weeks, 4 weeks in between the new year and the holidays and stuff like that where you don't have any UFC. That was fucking rough on me.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, this sucks. Like there's nothing to do on the weekends. I don't really like football. I don't really like basketball. I don't really give a shit. I'll watch some hockey games every now and then because a fight can break out. But for me, athletics, it's either like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, or fighting. These are my things. And fighting encompasses boxing, kickboxing, all the combatives.
Well, there's just so much that goes into it now, especially in the ranking system. Like how is Sean not ranked right now? Like,
Yeah, I don't know.
He's fought 3 people in a row.
Or Grant Dawson being ranked. I think he just got ranked 15th.
It's because Grant doesn't really finish as much. That's
Yeah, but he's fighting. I think he's got one loss in the UFC.
Yeah, Grant is amazing. He's probably the best grappler I've ever gone with. Like,
Really?
Yeah, he this was years ago when I went to Glory. I was like, that kid, he's different. So
Dakota Bush was praising him immensely.
yeah, and with good reason. I mean, he's
the
great
shit.
training partner. Yeah, he's really solid. Now, if he strung together a couple knockouts, he'd be getting more opportunities, and that's what it's gone to. But Sean's fought 3 people in a row that were ranked at like 15, and then as the fight got here, they fell out of the rankings, and then he was even injured that last fight, and we didn't even spar, and he goes out and finishes this guy, and then doesn't even get ranked. It's just kind of like, what else you got to do here,
I think it's crazy that the rankings are made up of the media and not necessarily some sort of metric or like, how like Tapology has the algorithm for doing rankings. So like you might have less wins or losses than somebody else, but because of the strength of schedule, you might be ranked above someone. I think like whatever algorithm Tapology does for their rankings, just copy pasta that to the UFC.
Yeah.
Leave the media out of it completely and do it by algorithm base of like, Jordan fights Mop fights Arion fights Jordan, and depending on how those fights go, you beat Mop beats me, I beat you, but like maybe you knock him out, he decisions me, I sub you, maybe the knockout's worth more than the sub, what have you, but then like do it based on like a numerical mathematical system that everyone can get behind and make sense. Because the thing that drives me the most crazy about the rankings is the pound for pound and how that's basically like, who won a fight this weekend?
Yeah.
They're going to go up 5 points in the pound for pound. You're like, what the fuck are we talking about?
Yeah, I feel like they overlook GSP a lot more now as we get further away from him than not, because the modern day training camps were outlined by him. He would drive to New York and go with Danaher and train there, and then he would go to gymnastics because he did gymnastics for some strength conditioning, and then he would go do strength conditioning, and then he would go to this other gym.
TriStar with Faraz.
TriStar with Faraz, yeah, and he was the first one that put
And he would
together
also do
all
some
these
stuff with
things.
Greg Jackson back in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
I remember there's that photo of like John Danaher, Greg Jackson, Faraz Sahabi in his corner before some fight, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what a fucking corner.
Yeah, and before that, all these guys were like, they would be at Militich Fighting Systems and Bettendorf, Iowa, all in one room. And, they did some stuff
Or
outside
Hit
of that.
Squad here in Illinois.
Yeah,
Back
and-
when Matt Hughes and Robbie Lawler were in, they had the dorms and actually had like a fight team.
Yep, it's grown a lot, and GSP was the first one to change that. And I'll be honest with you, I was a Matt Hughes guy, so I couldn't stand GSP. So now, the more you watch him later on, you can kind of really appreciate what he did. And it's weird how at a certain point he got out in time, because when these guys fall off, they fall off. And it could be injury, it could just be timing, they're off a second. Like, look at Adesanya.
Yeah.
And then look at Usman before that. And
I
then
think-
look at Woodley before that.
I think success begets success, and failure begets failure.
Yeah.
I think they say that, when someone breaks a world record, then the averages all start to increase by proximity, because like now the preconceived notion of whatever that ceiling was has been shattered.
Yep.
So you're kind of like, oh, well, hold up. Maybe it's not as difficult as I thought it was. And it kind of allows for people to really push themselves both mentally and physically. I think the inverse can happen as well.
Yeah.
If you believe yourself the top of the mountain and you fall halfway, you're like, holy shit, maybe I'm not as stable as I thought I am. Now you start to doubt yourself. You don't have that same ambition and that same ego. And I think, you start getting in your own head. And I think, Adesanya is the most recent example, but he is not the only one where like Woodley might be the most, and I hate saying it this way, but Tyron Woodley might be the most like graphic display of this, where like you were a killer.
He was dominant.
Kamaru Usman lost every fight after that.
Yep. There's a book on that where records break and then people don't think it could have been broken and then everybody breaks it. It's called The Rise of Superman. It's pretty good. But then also, if you even look at like Conor McGregor, first guy that won 2 belts at once, right? No one had done it before. Yeah, okay. Then GSP kind of did it because he came back. Daniel Cormier did it. He had both
Amanda
of them.
Nunes.
Yeah, Amanda Nunes. So once someone sees it can be done, then they do it. So these guys that first break the barrier, something that should be looked at and kind of like that was pretty cool. That took a special person.
Yeah, well, 1 point is a point, 2 is a trend. So I agree with you there. I don't know, Jordan. I subscribe to fighters have never been better than they have than today. I think just like the unranked in the UFC today could mop the floor with some of the ranked guys just 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I would say that.
But I also think that the feeder leagues into them have never been more diluted, kind of to what we were saying about like fighters not fighting fighters and all this other stuff. I'm curious what your take is on this because Sean Woodson himself did come up through the Contender Series. What do you think about the Contender Series? Is it a net positive or negative to MMA as a whole?
Well, for us, it was a positive because it got us in there. So I can't really say anything
Try
bad
to
about
eliminate
it.
your bias, though.
So if I am stepping back and look at it and I want to get somebody in the gym I'm in the UFC and they are turning pro and they're 2-0, I'm going to go get to 5-0. Get to 5-0. And then after that,
But 5-0 and it doesn't matter who their opponents are.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Well, then, okay, so then if you're saying that about some guy that you're trying to get up, how can we then, would we not be hypocritical in saying this is the path that I would take today? How can I then talk shit on the guys doing exactly that, even though it wasn't necessarily the same path we took?
Well, the only problem is they're doing it at the amateur level.
I don't know if you can say that.
At the amateur level, they're ducking the tough fights. Some of them are.
But that has always
But
occurred.
as a
Even
pro-
when we were amateurs, you knew the guys that would duck and dive and didn't fight certain people
Yeah.
or would only fight certain people on certain promotions. That shit always existed.
Well, that's okay, but like picking and choosing fights as an amateur, I disagree with as much. But as a pro, that was always my plan.
I would actually make the inverse because you're not getting paid as an amateur. I can't force you to do dick if I'm not paying you. So like if you want to duck and dive and pick and choose and you're not getting paid, dude, by all means, once you go pro, if you're a professional, then this is now a business transaction for you. Your goal is the highest level. That's when I actually think that you have less autonomy in who the opponent should be. Now, I'm not saying that you can't control your career, but I would actually weight it against the pros more than I would the amateurs.
Here's how I would do it nowadays with everything changing. Now, I took fights out the gate that were tougher than I should have. The same year I was an amateur in January, I took the toughest fight in my weight class as a pro in November because it was on Bellator, because I thought that was the way to do it. That would get me up there. Now, what I would do and what I would have others do is I would go to a promotion when I turned pro, Brad and Marlene, for me, because I'm not dealing with the other ones because I know what they are. And I would just go, look, here's our goals. We want competitive fights. We want some where, we have some advantages, Let's gradually build it. We want, if you can, we want to find a guy that'll test us in the stand-up, but we know we can put him on his ass and just put him down whenever we need to. We're going to get to 5-0. We're going to try and get on a Contender Series. And then from there, we're going to stay local and stay active until we need to. You guys will always be home base.
Yeah.
We get to the UFC, we're going to show up at your events. We're going to do commentary for you. You guys are our home base. That is what I wanted with Shamrock, that they never reciprocated. I always wanted that to be my home base. I always wanted to be, this is the brand that got me here. I'm going to commentate for them. I'm going to do the podcast with them. These are my dudes.
This is why I find that relationship schism so weird, Jordan, because you guys were on such good... there was a moment in time where like you were one of like, you know, in the circle of Shamrock FC. You were doing the commentating. You had a good rapport with Rob and Jesse. So like, there's a part of me that understands why you're saying what you're saying, but then the devil's advocate in me is also saying like, yeah, but at any moment there's variables within and without your control that can happen, and it's like,
That's where a conversation comes in, an honest conversation,
explain.
one that was never had. Here's what I want. Well, we can't give you that. Okay. Why not? And what are my alternative options? That's all it needed to be.
You never had that.
No. No.
Oh man.
But that's all done now. But that's how I would approach it now. I would align myself with a local promotion. And there are guys that are doing this on Shamrock. I mean, Evan's done it. And Max was trying
Justin
to do it. And
Lambros.
Max a bad dude.
Max Troyev, yeah.
That's the way to do it, guys. Like, you know, you need to have these
I feel
conversations.
so bad for Max, man, because he was up against that guy, and the Sean Shelby from the UFC was in the crowd, and so was Uriah Faber. They were there specifically to watch Max. I felt for him so bad when he got that decision loss.
Do you know why they're able to do that now, though, on both promotions? Because there's competition, and I didn't have that at the time. Rumble time was gone.
Well, I would also say that it was also because the UFC was actively going against Tim Lukinov because he pulled Uriah Hall from a fight.
No, I mean like the pro route of, hey, guys, this will be my pro home.
Yeah.
Because Rumble Time wanted my pro debut. They didn't get it because I was talking with Rob and I liked what he had to say.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go on there. I liked their promotion. Their shows were second to none in production. You telling me I can get a couple of fights at the Lumiere and then go to the River City Casino? I'm
Sign
all
me
in,
up.
bro. Sign me up. Like, I'm in. You guys need someone to commentate with Jeremy? Yeah, I would like to do that. I'll do the interviews. Let me in on this. I want in on this. This is home base. You know, let's grow this. I see a lot of potential in this. And then it just didn't work out that way. But now that there's competition in town, someone could do that. They have the ability to say, hey, if you won't do this, I'll go to them.
How much room do you think there is for competition in St. Louis specifically? Like, how many promotions do you think could feasibly run in tandem with one another? So right now it's Shamrock and NFA.
I think
and then
we're
you
there.
have Chad Mueller doing his Muay Thai promotion. You have Adam Meredith and Adam Sella doing their BJJ shows. Aside from LFA when they're in town, UFC when they're in town, I mean, it's basically just NFA and Shamrock in terms of like what is available for MMA fighters to compete in. How many promotions do you think can feasibly function in the St. Louis market?
I think we're there now with 2.
2 is cap.
I mean, somebody'd have to prove me wrong. I mean,
Do you think
Just-
there's not enough fighters?
So,
Why 2?
when I listened to both Donikers on here, which was good, Rob, I liked it. That was good. And Marlene's, they pretty much said the same thing. It's a little bit harder to get these people in. I think a lot of it is because the gyms, there's not as many gyms.
Yeah.
So, and some of those smaller gyms that may not be as skilled, they were tough. And they would show up all the time and they'd have people to fight. MCS back in the day, they weren't the most technically skilled, like
They
on the
showed
ground and with wrestling, but they put on some fights that were insane back in the day, especially at the heart of St. Charles, the banquet center. You would see people in their debut go in there and put up a hell of a fight. Like, that's when I think of it as like, you know, being the old guy of the glory days. I could show up to an amateur fight, and NFA has this where their undercard is like, I've commentated these and I'm like, I don't know who some of these guys are, but the whole card delivered. And I felt like at the time when I was competing and there was people from other gyms that I knew, and I would just show up and there'd be people I never heard of still going out there and putting on performances like this. That was cool. And that was just basically, even at that time, it was Jenkins and it was Shamrock. And then every now and then you would have a Fight Hard.
We had Fight Hard. I remember.
But they were like once
we
a
had
quarter.
NFA too. Nemesis fighting Alliance down south. We had.
They didn't have them that often, though.
Yeah, but the problem is proximity. So like they were farther away, and there was always out of conjunction. So it's like you at any given month you would have 2 to 3 shows. It was either like a Shamrock, a Jim Jenkins, a Fight Hard, Pat Smith and his promotion, Cage Warriors, no, Cage Champs. You had Rumble Time. You had Nemesis, the old OG Nemesis Fighting Alliance. I remember when I was coming up, dude, there was like so many promotions. I thought it was just Jim Jenkins until I had like my third or fourth amateur fight, and then like other promoters were kind of like picking up at me, and they're like, "Hey, well, we want you to fight for us." But the reason I chose Fight Hard was because they were at the Family Arena.
Yeah.
To this day, the best moments of my fight career was actually amateur ones. My very first time at Fight Hard, I fought Levi Rose for their championship bet, the inaugural 135-pound belt, and it was to the tune of like 5,000 people in the crowd. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, my title fight there got canceled. I was bummed.
I'm sorry, dude.
I showed up and he had food poisoning, and I was just like...
I have special reverence for that place. If I ever did a promotion myself, the Family Arena is where I want to do it.
Man, going back... I remember it was 2011. It was 11/11/11, and I think it was actually Veterans Day. They had that whole Veterans Day card.
Thank you for your service.
Ray Grindstaff was on it. I think he fought J.W. Wright, but man, that
Was that back when it was
those
Fight
were
Me?
shows. Yeah.
Yeah.
When they changed it up, I didn't like that.
Well,
I-
don't have to pay the amateurs.
but man, that was cool. I would like to see shows back there. The last one that was there was Bellator. I was on that one actually. I think that was the last one that was there.
At the Family Arena?
Mm-hmm.
No, the last one was the Family Arena, yeah, but it was you were on there?
On the last Bellator at Family Arena, yeah.
No, you weren't.
Yes, it was.
Who'd you fight?
Are you talking Julius? No, Julius was on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I was on the one
Bellator-
before that.
It was,
Okay.
it was during COVID too.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. So forgive me for saying
No,
it
I
that
messed
way,
up
but there was one during COVID years where they were at the Renaissance Hotel and they were at the Family Arena.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I know that was because Nico Alcaraz. They allowed one amateur fight and it was Nico, so we were down there too.
That was the closest Bellator got to competing because they would be on Fridays and the UFC would be on Saturdays, and you had like Michael Chandler in there, and they had some good names. And
They had some good fights here in St. Louis. Every time Michael Chandler was down, it would be a good crowd. Remember Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000? We saw that.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't in St. Louis, but we saw. Sorry, it was not. Not Kimbo Slice versus Dada
Ken
5000.
Shamrock.
Ken Shamrock versus Kimbo Slice.
That was fun.
That place was packed.
Do you remember?
They sold out the Enterprise Center.
And then they went all in on the production. The theater room where Shamrock had fights in the Lumiere, they had the little face-off special where they were sitting in chairs talking shit to each other. There was so much hype behind that card. That was so much
That's
fun.
back when they actually promoted and did it right.
Well, and then, I got to watch my friends compete there at the time, like, because they were on the undercard. Like, Hugh Pulley was on there. Adam Sella was on there.
Can I say something? And I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say this. That's such horse shit, though, because it was like they were packing the undercard with the ticket sellers, and that's what would generate the interest of Bellator for coming in. So, like, you'll sit there and they'll say, like, Bellator veteran, and I hate to say it this way. Forgive me. But, like, you weren't signed with Bellator.
Yeah,
you
that was the
fought
model.
on the undercard, the untelevised portion of Bellator. And the reason they did it was because every fighter had to sell a minimum of 100 tickets.
That was the model. Even now and then, I still get people like, "Oh, you fought in Bellator," and I was like, "Yes, but let me stop you." And I'm like, "Yeah." I will say this: I did take a fight one time on there that nobody else would take in this area at 170, but I took it because I had the chance at a 3-fight contract with Bellator, and that's why I took it. And Rob actually, I asked him to put it in the writing of the contract, and he did.
Okay.
So that one did not go my way, and that one was on me. So that was cool. And actually, one of the cool things I remember about that fight before this whole shit went down with those guys is as I got out of the fight, Finney came up to me and was like, "You look good. You're close. You're close. Just keep going." And I was like, cool. That's why I made all the other shit later. Like, what the fuck, man? But such is life. But that
Did you ever sit down with him and talk to him?
now, I don't know.
I would say never burn a bridge.
Well, here's the problem. I don't get that time back. So what is there really to solve?
It's not even about like apologies or anything like that. I'm saying like, wouldn't you want to maybe ask him now?
No. I already
just
know
don't
the
care?
answer. I don't need to hear the political answer. I know the answer.
I don't know, man.
I can't get 2 years back. If I could get 2 years back,
I
cool.
know, but I would like closure. If I were you, I would like closure. But I can't listen. I mean,
I don't require it because I know the answer. Like, the thing is, it's like you said, it was so easy to do the right thing and you chose not to. And now there's nothing we can do about it except me eating it. which I have to anyway. So why am I going to do this?
We've been on now for roughly like 2 hours and 40 minutes, brother. I have a couple more questions for
Yeah.
you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Number one would be, what more do you want to do in this sport now?
If I had the time, my
It
job
doesn't
right
necessarily
now,
mean competition. It can
Yeah.
be coaching, managing.
that's where I'm going. My job right now is so stressful. It's eating away at what I even perceive as my free time. There's a part of me that would really like to keep competing in jiu-jitsu because it's fun. And then there's a part of me that wants to be like, and I've actually been bullshitting this idea in my head, texting you like, hey, Ariane, what if we put a gym down in somewhere? You ran the wrestling program. I did this part. I brought in Adam Sella for a different. Part of me does wonder if I had control of a program,
What it would look like?
what it would look like, because I would have standards. But here's the other thing. I would have to be in a position where I'd have to be able to not have to rely on making a ton of money from it. There's programs that make good money. There's kids programs that make good money. And I'm all cool with that. I can have a good time. But when it comes to the MMA portion, instead of having 20 casuals, you give me 6 serious people, 55, 70 pounder, 85, or 3 different weight classes. I feel like I could take those guys a long way. But everybody's got to buy in. And I ain't got the time to hear about this, that, or you getting a girlfriend and knocking her up whenever we have shit to do here. Go live your life. Go have fun. Let's go have a fight camp. Go have some drinks. Go eat. Come back to work. If you tell me you want to be at the top level, I feel like I could get you there. But don't bullshit me, because you have teammates here too.
Do you want to coach? Do you want to open up your own gym like this? And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a functioning business based on what you're saying, but like, would you ever kind of cross the Rubicon and pull that trigger?
It would be very interesting. I would really consider it. I would need help though. I'm not naive enough to know that if it became something that took up all of my time and felt all on me, that it wouldn't over time be too much of a grind. Now, that's where you bring in generals, so to speak. You have someone else help run some of your other classes, or you handle more of the higher end stuff as you have people learning footwork. Like, I see new people show up to the gym and sometimes they don't even have basic footwork, and they're never really taught it. They're just kind of taught the sport, not the basic how you step when you jab, the stuff Jay taught Steve, that Steve taught me, that I would lock myself into the gym and put a metronome on for 2 hours every Saturday for months to get my footwork and hands working together. I would need to see somebody that would put in the work like me. I wouldn't want someone to say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and then show up 10 minutes late to practice. Now, if you showed up 10 minutes late to practice, there was traffic, you had stomach problems in the morning, you texted me, cool. I firmly believe if you gave me 6 to 8 people that were all in on it. Now, you have to work. You can't have no job and do this stuff. You have to have some form of income. And I could build a team on it. I could take them anywhere.
I have thought long and hard about what I can do to try to give back as much as possible. I floated the idea around of like possibly doing my own promotion, and I know that if I've already had conversations with Tim about like the structural operational side and whether or not it's legal with the state. Fun fact, it is. But if I did it, it would upend the whole business for everybody else, because it would be a non-profit organization, not an entity, but meaning like I could run it with zero operational awareness. Like, I don't need to make money on this. We just need to break even. And if I did that, you're basically like subverting an underground market. And I don't necessarily want to like compete with NFA and Shamrock. I just want to create a promotion that I wish I would have had when I was an amateur and a pro. Then I thought to myself, well, let's bring back Knuckle Junkies. But then, to be completely honest with you, and I had a long conversation with Brett Otten, the idea sounds good in theory, but the problem is because there's only 2 promotions now and not 6. NFA does 3 or 4 shows a year. Shamrock does 4 or 5 shows a year here. How much are you really bringing back Knuckle Junkies? You know what I mean? There's just not the amount of volume that there used to be. some would say that the podcast kind of fills that niche now. I can bring on fighters and I can have, instead of doing like a page article on them, I can have a long form conversation with them. But then that's only so much. Like I could do 1 or 2 of these a week. So like, over the course of, there's 52 weeks in a year. So in 1 year, I could do 104 of these, and they're not all going to be fighters, right? So it's like, what is my role? I think the one thing I would never step foot in, truly, is owning a gym, because I feel like gyms and restaurants are the businesses where there's no, you're married to that.
Mm-hmm.
That you're gonna be there all fucking day, because remember how much time you spent training. Remember
Yeah.
how much time you spent with your coaches and all that stuff. And you want 5 other guys, 6 other guys like that, killers. That's gonna take all your fucking time. That's your family now.
Yeah, it is.
You're not gonna have any time for kids, any time for wife, any time for any of that. Your life now is gonna be molding these killers.
And that's why you would need to have help with it.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, you couldn't really do it every day. So, whenever people come to me from different gyms, and I've had them come from all of them in this area complaining about their coaches. And I go, what you guys don't understand is that person has a life. They have multiple things they're balancing on. You're putting the onus of coaching every aspect of it. And some of you are devoid of good parenting. So you're putting a parent hat on them too. And that's too much for them to do it.
It's also too much to ask.
Well, and here's the thing, like, I don't know Mike Rogers that well, but I know enough about some people that have been around him that he's done a lot for a lot of people. And he's got a good heart. That weighs heavily on somebody if he's doing things for these people, and maybe it doesn't bother him as much, but if they go off and do something else after he's helped them, or, not betray him, but they do something that goes against what his wishes would be that he had set them up for success for. That part is tough, but everybody wants to always be so hard on the top dog, but they have other things going on. You have to have some responsibility yourself, and that person also needs help. So you need to subvert yourself to who they put in different positions, whether you agree with them or not, because they're your point of contact, but they can't own all your shit. That's on you.
I agree.
That is on you.
You're an adult.
And I've had people all the time, you going to open a gym? And I'm like, you guys don't want me to coach you. I used to tell Danny Moriarty this. But you don't want me to coach you. You'll fucking hate me. I covered a class one time at Wolves Den, and I was like, you guys are going to learn some shit tonight. And so what I was trying to do is I was trying to make them understand mentally how they can push through anything. So some of the guys that had fights coming up, I put them in a 10-minute Shark Tank. Every minute they had a fresh guy. They were worn out afterward. But when I told them what we were doing, they were, oh my God. About halfway through it, they were tired, but then they accepted what they were in. And they came out of it like, I needed that. Now, you don't do that all the time, but I kind of like some of that old school stuff. And there's a part of me that would like, to pay homage to Jay and Steve and even John Menke, who helped me a lot, and Brad from the War Room, and all these guys that had a part in my story. Like I've plagiarized all stuff from them and made it my own. And there's a part of me that almost feels like I not just owe it to me or myself, but the sport and other kids that were like me that, had a chip, and I got some shit to prove because I was held out of high school sports a lot because of politics, and just give me a shot and I'll prove it. To give those guys the opportunity those guys gave me, because they were busy too. They had stuff going on too. Now, I couldn't have them own each and every single thing, and that was one thing I think that burned Steve out originally. It was Steve was a surrogate father for a lot of guys in that gym, and then he had his own son that he wasn't planning on having. His life completely changed, as it should have when he had his kid. But then that left me in a vulnerable position where Steve was my go-to for everything, and that's how I ended up in a bad contract and everything else, because there wasn't a manager out there that could go, hey, I got the experience, let me guide you here. And it's kind of one of those things where I think I could guide people to be there, not just in the technique, the approach, but in here's how we get there. Here's how we approach on fight day. The fight starts at the weigh-ins. Don't look weak. All these little mental cues that I've come accustomed to that I think people overlook. I'm a little more intense at it than most people are, but if I got someone on that same frequency, I think I could take them a long way.
I resonate with a lot of what you said, but for me, there was a sport before martial arts, and that was wrestling. And that's why I've kind of catered more towards coaching wrestling. And full disclosure, we have like 3 other coaches, so like it works well within my schedule, even though it doesn't work within my schedule, because if I ever can't be there or whatever, I at least know practices are covered and all this other stuff. I could not imagine the overwhelming pressure I would have if I was like the only coach. And like, if I'm not there, we can't have practice. And not just that, but like, I know I don't know everything. I know the things that I know, but there might be some people that know some things I don't know. So I think that idea of, kind of garnering like-minded individuals in a common pursuit is wise. I don't know, man. I don't know what the future holds.
All lineages eventually come to an end, but who carries on the guys that had helped me? I don't know who that is, unless it's me. Does that mean I have to do it? No, I maybe there's a time and place where I can do it. I would be afraid of, if training became my job, I would resent it. Because you never work a day in your life if you love it, but whenever it becomes something you have to do instead of you get to do, I've always wondered how that works. Because it was like a fight camp, right? Toward the end of fight camp, you had to do the things, right? You didn't really get to do them. And then when it was done and you get to go to the gym and have fun and spar and eat the food, it was fun again. But toward the back end of that fight, you're almost ready for it to be over, not the fight
questioning
itself.
why you're even doing any of it.
Yes.
Every fight camp I had, I was like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
Why am I miserable?
Yep. And then you go out and you win and you're like,
All right,
let's do it
wasn't that
again.
bad.
Let's
wasn't
get back
that
on the
bad.
roller coaster, man.
Next one.
Yeah, I'm going to get back in line.
I'm glad I did it. It made for some cool stories. Like, I posted an image on my Instagram story. I completely forgot that I had like 4 fucking amateur belts by the time I went pro. And Sid G was actually the one that sent them to me. So shout out Sid G. And he's like, hey, I was just rummaging through some of my old photos. Check this one out. And it was me. I had no tattoos. I had no facial hair. I was like 22, 23 years old. And I'm sitting in the Fight Hard arena with all my belts with the, with the mic in front of my face. And I was like, damn, like, you just forget. And I'm just really glad I decided I'm really glad I decided to do fighting. I'm really glad that I decided to develop that skill set. I'm really glad that it gave me the confidence and the patience and the perseverance. Wrestling gave me a lot. Fighting gave me a lot. And the network I've built from both of them, I would have never met you. I would have never met some of the people from wrestling that I met. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad you did it.
I was young and I was angry. And I'm glad that's the outlet I found, because it let me know I was not equipped for combat like I thought I was. It brought me a good network of people. It gave me something to push and strive for. So I felt like I was personally developing in multiple ways, mentally, physically. I could have turned to destructive things, which wasn't necessarily what, I had done in my past, but it was always an option, because as I graduated college, the world just wasn't what they told me it was. And I was so angry about it. I did everything right. I went to school. I didn't knock up a girl. I went to high school. I did all this stuff right. And here I am in a job I just fucking hate, and I'm angry. And so it was my way to fight back. Like, if you watch the movie Fight Club, it's not about fighting. It's about the rebellion from society and the system itself. That was what it was for me. And in turn, I met Steve and I met Sal, and my brother was there, and I had, guys like Nick Dianetta and Aaron Brown, and then you, and then Jay D'Amato, and then Clark. And it just kept going on and on. And then as that gym closed, I went up and I met Brad, and then John, and it just goes on and on, the people you meet, because whenever one door opens, you find another one, and then that other network's there. And, I met Mop at the War Room because he walked in, and me and him, he's, while we don't always see eye to eye on everything because we're humans, like, my life and my training is so much better because I did.
Yeah.
And it's weird how all that goes on. And if people embrace it and know what it is while they're in it, it's medicine. It gets you through it. It'll grow you. You just got to be in it for the right reasons. You can't just be in it because you want to be a fighter. You got to want to better yourself. If you want it for attention, you're in the wrong thing.
Jordan, 3 hours.
3?
I wanted to thank you for being on again. I hope this was enjoyable for you. I'm sorry for my impromptu nosebleed.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you for walking down a couple paths with me. I know that this the end of the conversation was a little bit more somber than the beginning. Well, the beginning was a little bit more fiery because of the political issues, but
That's the nosebleed.
and the nosebleed. I don't know if I say this enough to you, but I'm glad I met you. I'm glad that we have a friendship. I'm glad we've done some pretty cool shit together, from training together, Two Pros Knows.
Yeah.
Here we are
Yeah.
again.
Oh, man.
It's been a decade, right?
Yeah. Oh, that show. Talk about the good old days, right?
Never bringing that back. I'm gonna change the title to this episode of Two Pros Know, episode
The
1.
thing is, though, with all the decor you have in here, I think we need a golden onion. It doesn't need to be awarded to anybody.
Who ended up winning that? Was it Ace Anderson? God bless you.
Everybody.
Sorry.
Everybody won it.
I'm sorry, dude.
The St. Louis area in general won it because of how they all acted. But look, you could just have one right here, and then people can assign to it whoever they want.
And I'd be honest with you, I'm ashamed we ever did that.
I'm not. You know,
We were such little shits.
people just, if you give them a reason to act the way they want to, they're going to, and that's all we did.
Give someone a platform, they'll show you themselves.
We went into it to be funny. They made it into that. We did not.
The Golden Onion was an award we did for the Two Pros Know, where we essentially awarded the shittiest person in the MMA community. And the championship round was between Kenny Nowling, the promoter and owner of Fight Hard, who beat his wife in the back of a show, and Devin James Anderson, who faked cancer. So, Jordan, been a pleasure, brother. Thank you for winning out. Would you ever want to hop back on?
Yeah.
For a round 3?